Lu Mingfei lay on his back on the bed, staring at a pair of godless black eyes like a dead fish. When people are subjected to a huge mental impact, their brains are often blank and temporarily lose the ability to think. For example, Lu Mingfei, who is currently in a daze, gnaws on his nails unconsciously. After a while, Lu Mingfei tremblingly took out his right hand with his fingertips dripping from his mouth, rubbed it on the bamboo mat under him, and grabbed the Xiao Yang quilt on his hand, which was stuffed into his mouth. Inside, biting tightly. After a while, he fully recovered, spit out the corner of his mouth with a poof, and then wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Suck. He took a long breath, then slowly exhaled it, closing his eyes, looking for the familiar feeling 10 minutes ago, a feeling of being drawn into a strange space. After only a moment of dizziness and weightlessness, he felt his bare feet stepped on the cold stone surface. Tentatively opened his eyes, Lu Mingfei looked around, and his eyes were pale. He looked down at his feet, although it was hard and cold stone to the touch, it was completely pale. This is a completely white world with no boundaries. Everything around is too pure white, the only variegated color is Lu Mingfei, who only wears a pair of underwear, and a jade slip hanging about 3 or 4 meters away in front of him. The jade slip is rolled up. To Lu Mingfei's naked eyes, the length of the jade slip should be about the same as a 20-centimeter stationary ruler, and the diameter is about a circle larger than the transparent glue used for typos. Lu Mingfei licked his lips and wanted to get close to Yu Jian to touch it, but he didn't dare to touch it. If he still believed in the so-called platinum star, rubber fruit and kaleidoscope writing round eye when he was in his second year of junior high, then he would have strode forward and laughed wildly, my Lu Mingfei is indeed the protagonist. I copied the jade slip into my hand. But he has now graduated from the first year of high school and will be promoted to the second year at the end of the summer vacation. He has passed his second year of middle school. As early as a year ago, he had known that there were no double messengers in this world, no devil fruits, and no chakras who could step on water, climb trees, and cast shadows and spiral pills. This world is called the real world. It only has the Mont Blanc watches that my uncle will always talk about and the ants increasingly complaining about the soaring house prices. So Lu Mingfei a year ago had to accept the reality. But the surreal thing today is so hardly placed before him by fate. In the second year of junior high, he watched 3 series of The Matrix, dreaming that he also had some kind of unexploited magical potential, and dreaming that a mysterious person would come down from the sky to discover his potential and make him become a bull in front of everyone. To do something big without coaxing. But until today, his destined mysterious person did not fall from the sky during the day. Lu Mingfei sometimes wondered if his mysterious person was lost and could not find himself. The lost mysterious man looked for his clues and looked for clues, so he cleverly squatted in an inconspicuous corner among the crowd and waited. Accompanied by the change of school uniforms one after another, he admitted little by little that the mysterious person who was tirelessly searching for him may not have lost his way, but that he did not exist at all. He accepts reality until today, and has held several solemn and grand funerals in his own fantasy for the mysterious man who has never been able to find him. The mysterious man who was buried in the coffin suddenly uncovered the coffin tonight and jumped 3 feet from the sky. While patting his shoulder vigorously, he laughed boldly and said, "I'm so worried, I'm sorry, brother. I'm late, your road is really not easy to follow, I opened my eyes when I was lost for a long time and let you be buried in the soil, if it weren't for my brother, I'm proficient in corpse fraud, I wouldn't see you today." After Yan, he put a revolver in his left hand, a desert eagle in his right, and swiped the hem of the windbreaker around his shoulder to save the world. Lu Mingfei said that I, the mysterious man who started and coaxed my life, came so hastily. Anyhow, you come to a German doctor to see my inner integrity and kindness, and then invite me to participate in some super soldier plan, right? Or an old beggar stopped me on the way and said, "My little friend, you have a light spurting out of the heavenly spirit cover. It's okay. I'm sure to hold his thigh and buy the Tathagata palm without saying a word. But what's the matter with this jadeite jade that is considered new in the museum? He stayed up all night tonight. When he was lying in bed and just closed his eyes to go to sleep, he felt that his head was hit by some hard object, and then he came to this ghost place. There are no German doctors, no old beggars, and there is no aura and 10 UN martial arts secrets from the Sky Spirit cover. There is only this jade slip that looks very valuable and will fly and shine. At the moment when his head was smashed, he thought it was a prank by the fat cousin Lu Ming's who lived in the same bedroom as him. The dizziness and weightlessness came here later. Lu Mingfei feels that the fat cousin with a height of 160 and a weight of 160 should not have such great abilities, otherwise he would not have worked hard to run his own social network account in order to find a girlfriend. After entering this space, he was so frightened that he almost didn't kneel down and worship the Beifang gods on the spot. When he was still dreaming about surreal power in the 2nd grade, he only wanted to leave quickly. At that moment, he felt that he really understood Yegong in the story of elementary school idioms. If Yegong appeared in front of him, his Lu Gong would have to take the world degenerate person and worship him on the spot. Fortunately, he did leave this space smoothly in the end, and he didn't do anything. It seemed that he wanted to leave very strongly and then left. But I don't know if it was because he was too scared. He always felt that after leaving that space, not only his brain was very clear, but his body was also a little light and fluttering. But after all, he still didn't pee in the bed. Lu Mingfei felt that he still had a bit of courage in his bones. If it hadn't been for the shorter time in that space, he might have 2 bad words about Yaxing. After returning to his bedroom, he still felt unwilling after experiencing a slightly unhygienic calming process. After hesitating for a long time, he gritted his teeth and tried to enter this space again. This is like ordering a daily dungeon for a single player in a game. This dungeon was originally going to be vomiting, but this time, I suddenly saw a mighty and hideous man. Qiuxuanang has never seen a big monster. Most players, even if you think you can't beat it, I'm afraid I can't help but rush to open the blame. Regardless of whether it was a hidden boss or a system error, I encountered an unseen monster in this already brushed dungeon. Even if it looks more domineering than Deathwing, you should still be able to use a knife, after all. There might be no such shop in this village. Seeing a strange thing that has never been seen in a boring daily copy is like seeing a novel thing that has never been seen in a cookie-cutter life. If you want to hold back from touching it, you need to contain more than curiosity. Heart. There is also the unwillingness to something once missed, it will never be stopped. The emerald green jade slip was like a sharp steel knife, and with a sound of it cut through the web of Lu Mingfei's dull and boring life. The knife has already flown in front of him. Is it to tear this boring life to pieces by holding the handle of the knife and swinging the knife, or do you ignore it, and let this big web with a decay smell be densely woven like the silk thread in Chakotay's hand? Lu Mingfei gritted his teeth and grabbed the handle of the knife, but he still didn't dare to touch the bamboo slip. The ghost knew what would happen after touching it. What if someone else on the road dies prematurely? He hasn't held Chen Wenwen's hand yet. But if he left like this, he didn't know what he could do to extinguish the burning unwillingness in his heart. There seemed to be another person in his ears who was talking. The extraordinary life you dream of is right in front of you. As long as you take a little risk and try to touch that jade slip, you may have a completely different and wonderful life from then on. Lu Mingfei, are you willing to live so ordinary? You want to endure the uncle's nagging, the aunt's rolling eyes, and the bullying of the fat man. It looks like a little transparent in front of classmates and teachers. 2 years later, I am dingy to test an ordinary university, find an ordinary job, go to a boring class, and still don't know how many years of mortgage to pay back. I look at you like it. Chen Wenwen married someone else. Beep. Lu Mingfei blurted out an swear word, strode forward and copied the jade slip into his hand. Gan. Lu Mingfei, who realized what he had done under the impulse, was shocked, and just about to put down the jade slip in his hand, Yujian gave out a strong golden light and enveloped him completely. At the same time, massive amounts of information flooded into his mind chaotically and orderly, giving him a strange feeling of intracranial ventilation. About 2 or 3 minutes later, the golden light dissipated, Lu Mingfei trembled and his face was full of excitement. After taking several deep breaths in succession, he finally calmed down, released the jade slip in his hand, and the jade slip flew back to the original place automatically. He took another deep breath, closed his eyes, concentrated, stretched out his hand in the void in front of him, and took out a bottle of Nutrition Express. Yet! Lu Mingfei yelled in excitement. The appearance of this bottle of Nutrition Express proves that the information that this jade slip named Book of Heaven instilled in him is indeed true. Here is his spiritual space, or the sea of consciousness, where he can create and change everything, although in essence it is just false. Creating false things in the sea of knowledge is like having a lucid dream, which is not enough to make Lu Mingfei so excited. After all, the false is always false. What really excites him is that the information instilled into him by this Book of Heaven actually contains a set of techniques for cultivating immortals that only appeared in novels. Since the sea of consciousness mentioned in the information is real, then, this exercise is also real? Lu Mingfei couldn't hold back his excitement, and couldn't help but shook his fists twice. Go to his mother's stand-in messenger devil fruit chakra, I am going to cultivate immortality this time. Xiaoxian. Lu Mingfei could not restrain his inner excitement. In addition to a set of cultivating methods, some basic common sense of cultivating immortals, and explanations of terms, the information that Book of Heaven instilled in him also included a large number of injection tools, alchemy, talismans, and formations. And so on knowledge. It can be said that as long as Lu Mingfei has eaten all these things thoroughly, it is more than enough to be a fairy in a novel and movie, and it is even a bit awkward. Baby! I love you so much! Lu Mingfei grabbed the heavenly book and kissed him hard. The Book of Heaven vibrated slightly, rubbed his face, then flew back to the original position, suspended quietly, the fluorescence emitted from his body dimmed a lot. Just instilled so much information to Lu Mingfei, it is not small, and it takes a while to recover. If Lu Mingfei has already cultivated mana, then he may be able to help the heavenly book recover through mana warming. But after all, he has just obtained a system of cultivation methods, but he has not had time to practice. Naturally, he has no magic power, and he can't help with a little bit of help. After playing in the sea of knowledge for a while, feeling that his spirit began to get a little tired, Lu Mingfei decisively chose to leave. He will go to practice for the first time in his life later, and he needs to stay as energetic as possible. And at the moment when Lu Mingfei's figure dissipated, a handsome boy in a small suit, elegant tie, and meticulously combed hair emerged out of thin air. The originally pure white space turned into pitch black with traces of war devastated Earth. Huge crisscross scars spread all over this land, blood and bones grew like flowers in Alfheim, the broken body of the ancient dragon wielded burning wings soaring under the dark sky covered with dark clouds, screaming and screaming to the ground. The corroded weapons sticking upside down were shaking. There seemed to be vaguely warriors in armors, spears and swords fighting in the distance, but the broken helmets and armors scattered on the ground with varying degrees of rust had predicted their inevitable ending. The boy is dressed in a modern suit, well-dressed, meticulous in his hairstyle, and the elegance of a nobleman, but he is not abrupt in this sad battlefield because he is lingering stronger than any dead in this land. The tragic breath. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com here, in this land full of war, blood, death, and life is not as good as death, there is only one thing that is incompatible. The jade slip named Book of Heaven is suspended quietly, glowing with a faint, white fluorescence, as if it is descending from heaven in a world full of suffering and filth, closing the white-winged Archangel Michael. Who are you? Or, what kind of existence are you? The handsome boy's expression was solemn and murderous. OM. Eujian shook, and the white light all over her body turned into a stream of light, and it hit the boy's handsome and cute face directly. Just before he was hit, the boy opened his lips slightly, as if he wanted to say something, but it was too late. The moment the boy's face was hit by Eujian, his body burst like a soap bubble poked by a urchin with a dry finger. Eujian slammed into the ground without any reduction, and the whole devastated land looked like bursting like a bubble. Lu Mingfei, who left the sea of knowledge, opened his eyes and saw the bright bedroom and the clearly identifiable ceiling pattern. He subconsciously turned his head and looked at the quartz clock hanging in the bedroom. The hour hand pointed between 1 and 2, and the minute hand roughly pointed at 6. He was turning his head to look out the window. The cloud was like mist, and the moon was in the sky. He got up quietly, feeling that his body was light and healthy like never before. Tiptoe out of the bedroom, Lu Mingfei walked into the bathroom. There is no need to turn on the lights, the darkness is already like day before him. He walked to the sink and looked up in the mirror. The boy in the mirror wore messy black hair on his head, his delicate and white face, and a pair of golden eyes shining brightly. Ronald Tang shot Gigi with a dull gaze and cut out the game. The bright sunshine at noon passed through the emerald green leaves washed by rain last night, leaving a transparent light path in the thin dusty air. It shone on him finely. Such sunlight should have made people lazy, but he just wanted to tremble. With his trembling right hand, he took out the last Camel cigarette in the cigarette case, and with the same trembling left hand, he took out the newly bought Zippo, and it lit the fire several times. What he holds in his hand is a high-quality windproof lighter that can be called luxury. Its fuel is a very stable petroleum extract, and the ignition mechanism is an ancient flint wheel, that is, a flint steel wheel structure. The flint that has been carefully processed and carved inside only needs to rub the steel wheel for a short period of time, and a pulsating flame can burst out at the friction point to ignite the fuel-soaked glass fiber movement. It is reasonable to say that such a lighter only needs to rub the steel wheel down with the outside of the thumb, and the movement can immediately vacate a stable and strong flame, but Ronald Tang has at least 4 or 5 strokes because of his shaking hands. The second steel wheel hit it. Ronald Don was smoking a cigarette, handed the enthusiastic orange flame to the end of the cigarette, and took a deep breath. The unique flavor of tobacco mixed with a slight burning sensation flowed into the lung cavity, so that his shocked emotions were relieved. Just a minute ago, on the screen in front of him, the machine gunmen from the human race dispersed in a dandelion-like posture almost hung by the gale, avoiding most of the attacks from his guardian, almost as a small soldier. Carrying an attack, and while dispersing, these brave machine gunners will draw their guns and shoot them, and they will solve his guardian in just a few seconds by firing together. When surrendered, he hadn't actually been driven into desperation. Although the situation was not optimistic, in theory there was still a chance to come back. Until he saw the operation method of the opposing player that almost scattered the machine gunners beyond the display range of the screen. He had to wonder whether the thing he was facing was a human or an artificial intelligence. Under his control, every machine gunner seems to have his own will and life. They are well trained, banned, fearless of sacrifice, and the most outrageous thing is that they have a spiritual connection. In front of the brave and even brave machine gun soldiers, his huge guardian is like a plate of crabs that has been served on the dining table and with a big 5 flowers. It might even be made into sashimi. Ronald Tang couldn't understand why an opponent who was randomly found in the MSN group of star lovers has such a tyrant-like dominance. This is like a fighting enthusiast looking for an opponent in a second-rate fighting club, thinking that the opponent is nothing more than a UFC champion with a brilliant gold belt. As a result, who knew this champion suddenly clenched his fists and drank his waist. After a sound, he exploded, not only the belt is gold, but even the short hair that is upside down is gold. Damn it! What does it mean that you, a super scion, do not save the world and save the universe but come to our little fighting club? Bullying us, a group of earthlings with a combat power of only 5, can you feel a sense of accomplishment? Ronald Tang felt that he was wronged, so he opened the MSN group where he encountered this Super Scion, and began to criticize the other side's abuse of food in the group, and his righteousness seemed like a case-stricken Baogong. Even the noise of moving trains from nearby light rails turned into an impassioned war song in his ears. At the same time, in an internet cafe in a small town in southern China tens of thousands of miles away, Liu Mingfei sipped his head back and took a sip of Nutrition Express. His black eyes were bright and energetic, just like leeks that had just been watered. It's 2:30 in the morning, and he sneaked out of his aunt's house to play games. After coming out of the sea of consciousness, he felt that his mental and physical fitness was a bit exaggerated, his strength became a lot, and he walked more lightly. It seemed that he had the ability to clear night vision with the help of weak light like cats. When I went to the bathroom, my eyes turned golden. He realized that these changes should have been brought to him by his heavenly book, so he hurriedly returned to the sea of knowledge, wanting to ask what happened to the heavenly book himself. When he entered, he was still speculating whether the heavenly book would have the get-up gas of human beings, but after entering, he found that the heavenly book was suspended in situ, and the surrounding fluorescence was almost extinguished. By virtue of the if there is no ground connection with the heavenly book, he can feel that the heavenly book is due to too much consumption, so he is recovering from cultivation, and he has entered a state of deep sleep. It seems that instilling so many things into him at one time, the consumption of the heavenly book is really not small. I just don't know why he received so much information at once without feeling any discomfort. He was even more energetic. Usually, he is dizzy with the longer ancient texts. Maybe this is also the credit of the heavenly book. The information is so huge that there are dozens of Xinhua dictionaries to compose a book. He usually has to memorize even a 200 to 300 character classical Chinese text for a long time, but now he can remember these complex information so clearly. If there is no help from the heavenly book, he himself can't believe it. I can't bear to disturb the tired Tianchu, and at the same time worrying that forcibly removing the Tianchu from the recovery state will cause harm to him. Liu Mingfei did not try to wake the sleeping Tianchu, but bravely slipped out of his aunt's house to play games. After all, only 4 or 5 minutes have passed since he came out of the sea of consciousness, his originally a little tired spirit was full again, and then he didn't feel sleepy at all. Although he was playing games, Liu Mingfei was always absent-minded. Otherwise, relying on the greatly improved reaction speed after coming out of the sea of consciousness, the opponent had just exploded the base as early as the 7th minute, and there was no chance of surrendering in the 10th minute. But his main mind is not playing games, he is thinking about cultivation. The Book of Heaven gave him a book on how to cultivate immortals, as well as a detailed tutorial that was almost hand-to-hand. It was simply a Fool Plus version. The details were so detailed that ordinary people like him who had never been in contact with immortality could also practice it. There are 6 realms in this exercise. The first realm is called consecration, which means to open a little spiritual light, and then you can embark on the road of practice. Strictly speaking, this realm is not actually a realm. It is more like a qualification, a precondition for cultivating immortals. Only when this condition is met will the gate of cultivating immortals be opened to people. If can't do it, it's better to go home obediently and be a farmhouse, it's better than wasting your youth and years. There are many specific methods of enlightenment, such as meditation, visualization, and taking Weidan are all possible for ordinary people to enlighten. The specific probability of success depends on the individual's aptitude and skill. But this has nothing to do with Liu Mingfei. According to the records of the exercises and the information passed to him by the heavenly book, he belongs to the 1 in a million, extremely rare naturally enlightened cultivation genius. Innate consecration is only on the point of consecration, and it is not more noble than the consecration obtained by cultivation the day after tomorrow. Consecration is consecration, and it is a pass for the path of cultivation. This pass does not have 3, 6, or 9 points. But the holder has. Good talents may not necessarily be naturally enlightened, but those who are naturally enlightened must have ridiculously good talents. It is difficult for ordinary people to enter the door in their entire life. After getting started, they have to explore the road to immortality. For Lu Mingfei, it is a broad and flat road that can be used as an airstrip, and even adds a direction. The front track. Lu Mingfei was quite flattered when he confirmed the news. After all, he has always been the end of the crane in the class. The teacher thinks of the poor students, and the ant uses his grades as a strong argument that our family's genes are better than your old family's genes. After all, although the fat cousin Lu Ming's has a round body, his grades are indeed much better than him, and he has always been among the best in the class. Except for the head teacher who sighed while looking at the average grade of the class, no one should expect him to get a mid-range score or even above. As a result, he was suddenly told that he was a genius without a single chance on another road. It is the only myth that electricity is light, and his little heart can't bear it. He always felt that his life might be turning a 540-degree turn from this day on. Although the natural gift of enlightenment can be called the African ostrich in the quail flock, the cultivation still needs to be based on the basic law. At least when there is a lack of accumulation in the early stage. This pass for cultivating immortals is the first realm. It just allows people to step on the road of cultivating immortals. It doesn't bring any magic to people. It can neither make people run faster or jump higher, nor can it allows people to see things at night or even through walls, which is horrible even for all diseases. But in the next realm after it, breathing, as long as you step into it, there will be an insurmountable gap between the cultivator and ordinary people. The state of food chi pays attention to refining the chi of the world and all things for its own use, turning these chi into its own mana. The deeper the mana, the more the chi of the world can be refined. When refining the chi of the world, the faster the speed, the mana will become more and more like a snowball. It is said that when the realm of cultivation was not perfect in the ancient times, some great abilities could develop great mana by only relying on the energy of food. But with the passage of time, the cultivation method is constantly improving and progressing. It has long been wiser than in the ancient times to know where there is no need to smash with the food state. This is a completely unprofitable loss business. And for Lu Mingfei, who is just consecrating and has not yet stepped into his breath, no matter how deep his mana is, it is a matter for the future. What he should consider now is to condense the first mana. The more profound the mana is, the more the chi of heaven and earth can be refined. This many includes not only the quantity but also the type. Then, on the other hand, people with weak mana will not only have a small amount of the chi of heaven and earth that can be refined. There are few types. For those who have not yet cultivated mana, there is basically only one choice: Oriental purple chi at sunrise. The purple chi at sunrise is of extremely high quality and extremely pure and gentle. After entering the body, it does not even need to be actively refined. As long as the mind is carried out silently, Zanchi Kungfu will naturally turn into its own mana. For those who have not yet cultivated mana, this is the most suitable for refining the chi of heaven and earth. After the refining purple chi has accumulated enough mana, more types of chi of heaven and earth can be refined. But even those great monks with high magic power usually don't miss the purple gas at sunrise every day. After all, such a pure and gentle atmosphere of heaven and earth is rare in the world, and there is no reason to let it go. It's a pity that the purple energy can exist for too short a time. Often there is only half a cup of tea at sunrise, and it cannot be stored in any form. Therefore, there is usually only one opportunity to eat the sunrise purple energy in a day. Lu Mingfei is really eager to see the magic power out of cultivation, and he can't wait for it to dawn right away, but the laws of nature will not change because of his personal thoughts, at least not now. So he has to wait for a few more hours, which is why he can still play games here while he can clearly understand the method of cultivating immortals. It's not that I don't want to, but that I can't. Furthermore, the method says that it is best to do something that you like to do before the first chi training to ensure that you can relax your mood to the greatest extent. Yu reading www.yuyu.com. Liu Mingfei's favorite thing to do is to watch Chen Wenwen, but there is really no Chen Wenwen to see in the middle of the night, so he can only come to the internet cafe to play StarCraft. Although he was playing the game, Liu Mingfei was itchy in his heart. It is hard to be relieved to want to come to this state of mind. After all, he was obviously blown by the strong wind with the smell of cheap snuffing cigarettes from the floor fan in the internet cafe, but he still felt a little hot all over. The mind is calm and naturally cool, but the mind is not calm and naturally warm. A message pops up in the chat window of the MSN group. This is a group of Interstellar fans he added after he came to the internet cafe tonight. The opponent he had just been absent-mindedly was in this group. At this moment, he was madly condemning Liu Mingfei's abuse of food in the group. News popped up one after another, as if the Maxim machine gun poured bullets. At this moment, the person with the screen name Ronald Tang is indeed a machine gunner on the battlefield. Heroic momentum. Although he had just been destroyed by Liu Mingfei's group of machine gunners. Ronald Tang's messages are all in English, and Liu Mingfei can only understand a little bit. Based on this opponent's strength, it can be used to relieve boredom when he is bored. Liu Mingfei sent a message in Chinese. Is Ronald Tang? Let's open another game? Not singled out, multiplayer online, I will take you. There was strange silence in the group for more than 10 seconds, and a Chinese message from Ronald Tang popped up. Thank you, Big Brother. Big Brother for his righteousness. Big Brother's righteousness and arrogance. Little Brother will help you in the future. Big Brother, you can call me Xiao Tang or Old Tang. I sent this message together, and there is a friend request. The head of the applicant seems to be a photo. It is a purely yellow face with 2 eyebrows on the couch. It is a very happy face. Liu Mingfei sat beside the chassis of the air conditioner, with his legs hanging down the edge of the stairs, shaking aimlessly. He was waiting for the purple gas at sunrise. To be on the safe side, he sat here an hour earlier. The sun came out at about 5 o'clock, and it was only 4 o'clock in the morning. He stared boredly at the traffic lights in the center of the intersection below, and the halo of red, yellow, and green changed every few moments. Kawabata Yazunari wrote, "Wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and see that the crabapple flower is not asleep." It is also 4 o'clock in the morning. Liu Mingfei is awake all night. There is no elegant crabapple flower in his eyes, only traffic lights. Stay awake with him. He has been here since he was a child, and he has been here for 5 years. This is also his secret base. Climbing to the top of the building and passing through the fence, it is as if he has come to a small world that belongs to him alone. Every time he sits here, overlooking the bustling traffic below the city in the dim sunset, the air conditioner next to him will sound like an old friend who greets him every day. Every time at this time, Liu Mingfei patted its old and rough white shell, just like patted a friend on the shoulder. Liu Mingfei is a member of the literary club at school. He has seen Shakespeare's Hamlet. The Danish prince said that he can be enclosed in a walnut shell, and still considers himself a monarch without boundaries. Although Liu Mingfei can't be a monarch and can't get in the walnut shell, he can at least pat his chest and say something. I can close in a fence and still consider myself a good friend of an air conditioner. When he sat next to the air conditioner, he was facing due south, with his left hand east and right hand west, so he turned his head to the left to see the sunrise, and to the right to the sunset. Now he only needs to wait for the white fish belly on the left to emerge. The waiting time is always the hardest. Luckily, Liu Mingfei also has a way to pass the time. The prerequisite for breathing out the aura of heaven and earth is to first perceive its existence. It is not difficult for people with mana. By transporting mana to the eyes, all kinds of heaven and earth aura in the world will be displayed in their vision, just like a curtain was opened, and a more real world could be glimpsed. But for the Kwasi monks who have just consecrated and have not given birth to the first ray of mana, even the easiest to perceive the sunrise purple energy, it is necessary to meditate a long period of magic art in an hour while calmly seeing its existence. And only when the purple chi is actually sensed, can the method of eating the chi come into play, allowing the monk to breathe in the purple chi and turn it into mana. There are nearly 2,000 words in this text, and the whole text is obscure. If it is placed in front of Lu Mingfei for him to learn, even if he scratches his head, it will take him several days to remember it all, and there is no way to understand the true meaning of it. But his tactics were directly instilled into his mind by the scriptures of heaven. Not only were they impressive, but they were also detailed. There was no need to worry about memory and understanding at all, just meditation. Took several deep breaths in succession, Lu Mingfei closed his eyes, concentrated as much as possible, and meditated in his mind silently. 2,000 words are not too much for meditation. About 3 or 4 minutes, Lu Mingfei completed a meditation, but he was worried that he would not be safe, so he repeated the meditation 4 or 5 times before opening his eyes. However, the scene in his eyes after opening his eyes is very different from before. The sky is still dark. At this moment, a hint of white fish has just appeared on the eastern horizon. It is not enough to bring light. The sun should take about 20 minutes to rise. But in the barely bright night, Lu Mingfei clearly sees the mist lingering on the surface of the city's lined buildings. It is a mist intertwined with pale yellow and pure white. This is not a real mist, but the air of heaven and earth reflected in Lu Mingfei's eyes, or, in other words, the air of the 5 elements in the air of heaven and earth. Pale yellow is soil, and pure white is gold. In terms of quantity, pale yellow is obviously better than pure white. Although the human city is called the steel forest, after all, there is more concrete, earth and rock than steel. Lu Mingfei rubbed his eyes to confirm that he had not hallucinated. He did recite the tactics, but theoretically, this tactic can only barely show him the purple chi, and the 5-element chi should wait for him to cultivate mana before he can perceive it and breathe it out. Is it because his talent is so good? Lu Mingfei couldn't believe it, but besides that, he didn't have any more reasonable guesses. His eyes swept over the circulating earth and golden energy beside him, and in the distance, Lu Mingfei still resisted the urge to use the method of breathing and breathing on them. Although it is tempting to cultivate mana immediately, for a fragile quasi-monk like him, a gentle and safe purple gas is the best choice, and it is the least likely to have any accidents. Lu Mingfei observes his nose and heart, no longer looking at the enthusiasm of earth and gold, and concentrates on waiting for the sunrise. Time passed by, and the white belly of the eastern fish became bigger and brighter. The dark and heavy night seemed to have been touched by water, and it had turned into a rather clear dark blue. Lu Mingfei stared at the horizon. Suddenly, a ray of red golden light emerged. At the moment when that ray of sunlight emerged, the horizon, which was still white and dark blue, was instantly filled with thick purple air in Lu Mingfei's vision. The purple air is mighty, covering almost half of the sky, thickly like clouds before a shower. A ray of golden red sunlight penetrates the purple gas. Although it can't blend the purple gas, it overlaps with the cloud-like purple gas in Lu Mingfei's field of vision, forming a noble color similar to purple gold. Purple energy didn't exist for a long time. Lu Mingfei didn't have time to marvel, and hurriedly ran the Chi method from the heavenly book, desperately pulling the purple energy over. The limit of the amount of purple energy that can be induced is the upper limit of the monk's tolerance, so the monk doesn't have to worry about attracting too much purple energy and causing stuffing, so he can pull it desperately. It should have been like this, and that's what Lu Mingfei got from the Book of Heaven. But looking at the sky overwhelming the sky, like the turbulent Yangtze River, there is a long river of purple gas. It is really hard for Lu Mingfei to believe that the amount of these purple gas matches his upper limit. The Ziki Yunhe rushes towards Lu Mingfei, but the sky is covered by the stretches and curls, like a purple Tianhe hanging upside down, and the small city below is like a river in front of it, as if a wave would be submerged. This kind of magnificent scenery like a sea of clouds is invisible to ordinary people. It only exists in Lu Mingfei's vision with the blessing of magic tricks. And if Lu Mingfei, the only appreciator of this magnificent scenery, expresses his thoughts about this magnificent scenery, he must not say the vast sea of clouds is boundless, who is the sky connected, or the sky is raging like a storm, and the sky is endless. Majestic poems such as The Wind Shakes the Ocean Tide will directly shout fuck. It's a pity that he has no chance. Before his fuck could be heard, the purple air falling all over the sky was highly concentrated, and then he and the whole community were submerged in a thick purple air column. Purple key target was Lu Mingfei, so although it was highly concentrated, it still enveloped the entire community, but it did not affect anyone else, and it rushed towards Lu Mingfei's spiritual platform. Lu Mingfei, who was pouring into a massive amount of purple energy from the Lingtai, has no extra energy to shout fuck at this moment. He is desperately trying to refuse to let these purple energy enter his body. Purple chi is indeed extremely mild, but even more mild things will be fatal. Even drinking too much water will kill you, let alone purple chi. But the amount of purple chi is so huge that Lu Mingfei can no longer refuse, but in just 2 or 3 seconds, he feels his body is completely filled, and the remaining purple chi continues to flow in with difficulty. It gave his body a kind of painful bursting from the inside out. Lu Mingfei felt that he was going to die soon. If nothing happened, his body would soon explode from the inside out because he couldn't bear so much purple gas. At such a critical moment of life and death, his mood suddenly calmed down, as if the surface of a calm lake. His body's violent cracking pain suddenly disappeared. He didn't wonder why the breath of purple chi that should have been extremely safe turned him into a letter of death invitation to him, and now it doesn't make sense to entangle this. When was about to die, he just twitched the corner of his mouth and said to himself with difficulty, I don't know if I will explode into fireworks later. Lu Mingfei, who exhausted his last remaining energy to spit out, was about to close his eyes and wait for death, but suddenly found that the purple chi that had swarmed into him suddenly stagnated, and at the same time, a crisp child voice rang in his ears. Brother, if you want to see the fireworks, you can tell me to let me set them off. Why bother to make yourself into fireworks? And the fireworks in the morning are not beautiful. Lu Mingfei, who had escaped for a while, suddenly turned his head to the place where the sound came from. That was his side. On his left, just a few steps away from him, stood a handsome boy in a small black suit smiling at him. The boy's small suit is neat and tidy, with a white silk scarf on the neckline, and dark brown square shoes on his feet, with the right eyebrows and diagonal bangs. But compared to the boy's aristocratic costumes and elegant and subtle aristocratic smile, Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com is more attractive to Lu Mingfei, but it is the boy's clear pale golden eyes. Lu Mingfei just got a pair of similar eyes a few hours ago. Lu Mingfei, who was the rest of his life after the catastrophe, saw the boy's pale golden eyes suddenly light up, and he had a bold guess in his heart. His golden eyes with wonderful eyesight were obviously given to him by the heavenly book. Now this little boy who suddenly appeared and saved him also has similar eyes. Combining his rich knowledge of Pharisee novels, let's make a bold guess. Little boy must be the spirit of the heavenly book. Thinking of this, Lu Mingfei, who was still sitting, leaned forward slightly, opened his arms and swept forward, and directly hugged the little boy in his arms. The boy's face showed an expression of error. Baby! You finally came to save me. Lu Mingfei hugged the little boy tightly and wailed, squeezing out 2 pinches of tears. The boy who had just condensed his wrong expression was dumbfounded again. Brother, although I can understand your excitement at the moment, is it a bit too exciting for you to call me baby? The boy who was hugged tightly by Lu Mingfei tried to struggle. He originally wanted to shock Lu Mingfei when he played like this. Who would have thought that this guy didn't play the cards according to the routine at all? Not only did he not be shocked by him, but he was shocked by the shocking words. Lu Mingfei, who felt the boy struggling, let go of his arms, leaned back, and looked at the boy. From the bottom of his heart, he thought about the first formal communication with the Qiling of the Tianxia baby. It was less embarrassing what he should use for the opening remarks. Lu Ming's looked at Lu Mingfei with a small face, wondering if his brother had become stupid because of the stimulation tonight. The world is completely silent, as if a TV program has been paused by a press, and the tranquility of the deadly silence fills the world. On the rooftop, Lu Mingfei ignored the weird environment around him, widened his eyes and exclaimed at the boy in front of him, "You said you are my brother." The boy nodded. "It's impossible, it's impossible." Lu Mingfei shook his head in denial without even thinking about it. "Not to mention that my unreliable parents, no matter how unreliable, I should always be informed about adding a younger brother." Lu Mingfei pointed to a small place under the boy's feet. "You can't be my brother just by your way of appearance. Unless my parents are hidden superpowers or mutants, you inherited their superpowers." "The son of mutants?" The boy nodded like pounding garlic. "I rely on it." Lu Mingfei was shocked suddenly. "Your name? Franklin Richards or David Charles Haller?" The two names he said were the son of Invisible Woman and Mr. Fantastic in Marvel Comics, and the son of Professor X. Lu Mingfei blurted out the names of two foreign comic characters to an Asian boy, indicating that he did not believe this brother at all. But the next moment, Lu Ming's answer made him almost jump from the edge of the roof. "None, I and you are both pure Chinese, of course the name is also a Chinese name." The boy straightened the bow tie on his suit, and said with a serious face, "My brother, my name is Lu Ming's." "Oh. Lu Narisawa." Lu Mingfei's tone was like seeing a samoyed whose food bowl was filled with cat rice. His mind can't help but think of his mellow cousin who is lying on the bed and sleeping, who is 160 in height and 160 in weight. Then he set his sights on Lu Ming's, who was like a young master of the European nobleman. Lu Mingfei tried to overlap the two figures in his mind, but soon he realized that his behavior was futile and stupid. It's like trying to overlap the finished instant noodles with the pattern for reference only prompt on the bag with the sample image on the bag. People who do this probably have never eaten instant noodles. Lu Mingfei can't really connect this boy with that fat guy Lu Ming's who snores so much that the sow can feel embarrassed. The boy in front of him is 10 atmospheres higher than Lu Ming's. I am afraid that Monkey King will feel desperate for this distance while driving on Somersault Cloud. Don't get me wrong, I am not your fat cousin, I am your brother. Seemed to see Lu Mingfei's shock, and the boy who claimed to be Lu Ming's explained. Can my brother have such great powers? Lu Mingfei was unbelieving a million. Then my parents are Superman and Superwoman. They do fly around like Superman all day long. They are so busy that they don't even have time to look at their sons. From this point of view, you can also say that they are Superman. When a superhero's children have to bear the neglect, after all, your parents busy spreading love to the world. Lu Narisawa nodded. Can you die if you sprinkle a little more? What they spread all over the world is actually pesticides, right? Lu Mingfei couldn't help but feel bitter. On Lanla, brother, are you still with me? Lu Ming's has a good brother attitude like brother's intimate little padded jacket. With such a warm and considerate appearance, an outsider would definitely not think that these brothers have just met each other for less than 5 minutes. You. Lu Mingfei looked at Lu Ming's up and down. What can you do? Cannot. Lu Narisawa suddenly took a big step back vigilantly, and put his arms around his chest. Brother, I am your brother. Lu Narisawa has a pedantic veteran expression of Your Majesty must never do this. Lu Mingfei was stunned for a long time before exclaiming in the bottom of his heart. There are people in the world who have brain circuits that I can't keep up with. Lu Mingfei opened his mouth and was about to say something. Suddenly, he felt a cool brow between his eyebrows. The pocket-sized book of heaven, only 2 or 3 centimeters long, flew out of his eyebrows and stopped on top of the head of the boy who claimed to be Lu Mingzadai. Then the body of the heavenly book, which was in a rolled-up posture, rose in the wind, and in less than 2 seconds, it became a jade pillar over 4 meters high and nearly half a meter in diameter. The whole body was splendid and hung quietly on top of Lu Ming's head. Lu Ming's raised his head blankly, squeezing out a smile on his delicate little face that was more ugly than crying. "Don't be impulsive, there is something good for business." Lu Ming's words were not completed, the yuja crashed down, and pale golden simple seal pots appeared vaguely around. Lu Mingfei stared at the scene in front of him dumbfounded, suddenly feeling that the world was spinning, and the scenery in front of him was distorted like a spinning top. On the rooftop, Lu Mingfei, who was sitting cross-legged, opened his eyes suddenly, as if awakened from a nightmare. He turned his head and looked around. The view was still the same. He was still sitting next to the air conditioner, and the old white casing of the air conditioner case was still mottled. The uncoordinated tranquility around it has disappeared, and the purple sky of heaven does not seem to have appeared before. The light gradually bloomed and the clouds were stunned. The wicker in the community faced the sun and was swayed by the breeze. An ornamental fish occasionally jumped up from the artificial lake next to it, making a few circles of ripples, and the ripples spread to the enclosure. On the shore, there is a gravel road with no pedestrians. Everything looks like a peaceful year, as if the crisis just burst by. The purple energy is just Lu Mingfei's nightmare. Damn! I won't fall asleep and dream while waiting for Ziqi. Lu Mingfei had a terrible guess from the bottom of his heart, but when he thought about it, he felt an inexplicable force pouring out of his body from nowhere, flowing in the body as he pleased, and the muscles and bones where he passed were warm as immersed in a hot spring. Lu Mingfei subconsciously controlled that power to gather in his eyes. After a little coolness, the world in his vision changed drastically. The light and thin mists of various colors are almost scattered on the surface of all things seen in the field of vision, the soil yellow on the surface of cement and soil, the light green on the surface of willow trees, the light black and light ink filled with the artificial lake. This is mana. Lu Mingfei's eyes widened. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com felt the magical power gushing from nowhere in his body, and he finally determined that what just happened was not what he was dreaming. At least breathing purple gas is not a dream. Lu Mingfei transfers mana to his eyes and looks around, unable to suppress the excitement in his heart. With mana, he is now a serious monk. Although as the lowest level monk, he can't even perceive the Xianguan ancestral aperture where his mana is stored, but he can still easily use the mana in the ancestral aperture. According to the cultivation knowledge he understands, with the blessing of mana, even if he does not know any spells, he can only use the most superficial way to transfer mana to the limbs of the 5 senses, and it can easily reach the limit of strength and sensory acuity beyond the limit of ordinary people. Level. That is to say, Lu Mingfei, as long as he transports mana, is able to wave his power at the boxing champion level. Of course, if he runs out of mana, he will die immediately. Only when he reaches the next realm, can he maintain a strong physical stamina even when his mana is exhausted. But after being turned into a little golden pupil by the heavenly book, he obviously felt that his physical fitness had risen by more than 1 level. Running at least 1 kilometer will definitely not be as tired as a dead dog. By the way, did I forget something? Looking at the bright morning light on the horizon, Lu Mingfei scratched his head, always feeling that he had overlooked important things. What is it then? Fuck. Auntie, it's time to get up and make breakfast at this point. Lu Mingfei's heart trembled suddenly, his mana was unconsciously transported to his legs, and he jumped 2 meters, and ran downstairs home like a rabbit whose tail was scorched by fire. Lu Mingfei. What are you doing? In the living room, the aunt, wearing an apron, a spatula in one hand and a rag in one hand, awe-inspiringly asked Lu Mingfei who had just entered the door. Although Liu Mingfei's physical fitness has been greatly improved, it can make his actions lighter and quicker, but this lightness is mainly reflected in his somatosensory. It does not mean that his body really becomes lighter when he acts. Or the movement becomes smaller. Landing silently is a technique that only appears in movies and TV series. No one has taught him, and he hasn't practiced it himself. Naturally, he was discovered by the ant in the kitchen as soon as he opened the door into the living room. Fortunately, my aunt doesn't seem to be very angry, at least not so furious as to be an angry female armadillo. It may be because of Liu Mingfei's energetic look that made her subconsciously reject the possibility of Liu Mingfei sneaking out to play at night. Besides, in my aunt's concept, it shouldn't be so bold. I woke up early in the morning, went out for a walk, and breathed in the fresh morning air. Road will come without opening his mouth. He is not a good treasure either. It is commonplace to secretly go to the internet cafe to play games without telling his uncle and aunt. Get up so early. Aunt was surprised. According to her experience in bringing children over the past few years, once the holiday is off, neither Liu Mingfei nor Liu Mings will rise earlier than the sun, and they will never get up until 3 shots of the sun. How did Liu Mingfei suddenly change today? But in any case, it is always good for Liu Mingfei to get up early. What if this kid gets rid of it? Can it make her more worry-free? As long as Liu Mingfei doesn't learn badly, she doesn't bother to have a line that is too wide. It's okay to get up early and take a walk. I save my days at home like a pig. The aunt waved her spoon, indicating that Liu Mingfei could withdraw. Write some homework. I'll call you when the porridge is ready. Hey! Liu Mingfei nodded and bowed, slid into the dormitory. As soon as he entered the bedroom, Liu Ming's irritating snoring sound was used on the floor, and Liu Mingfei, who had already developed resistance, turned a deaf ear, closed the door and returned to his bed. As for reading and summer homework, at least for Liu Mingfei, reading in the summer vacation is disrespectful to the summer vacation, and writing summer homework outside the last 2 days of the summer vacation is a great disrespect for the summer homework. Ignoring the snoring sound from Liu Ming's, Liu Mingfei lay flat on his back on the bed, closed his eyes, and sank into the sea of consciousness. Let me go. Why is it so dazzling? As soon as he entered the sea of consciousness, Liu Mingfei couldn't help covering his eyes. Although the consciousness in the sea of consciousness was not afraid of glare, covering his eyes with light was an instinctive reaction that Liu Mingfei had cultivated as a human for more than 10 years. It took about 2 seconds for Liu Mingfei to realize that he was in the sea of consciousness, and the common sense of the outside world did not apply here. He put down his hand and opened his eyes to face the strong light. As he expected, the center of the strong light was a rolled-up book. The heavenly book was suspended on the pure white ground, and Liu Mingfei walked over against the strong light. The heavenly book also escaped from its place, flew towards him, flew straight to the door of his face, and stuck to the forehead of the consciousness. In the next moment, a huge amount of obscure and mysterious information flooded his mind with completely incomprehensible information for Liu Mingfei. Compared with the installation of the painless, itchy, and almost no discomfort a few hours ago, Liu Mingfei directly sat on the ground staggered and paralyzed. Sparrow, let alone east and west, he can't even find up and down now. After a moment, the Book of Heaven ended the initiation of Liu Mingfei, and flew back to the original place to continue to float. The original bright and dazzling fluorescence of the whole body dimmed, and the brightness was only the same as that of the electronic billboards on the street. Liu Mingfei still sat on the ground, and it took a long time before his eyes returned to Qingming. He shook his forehead and wanted to stand up. After a couple of staggers, he sat on the ground decisively, with an expression of joy and regret on his face. Supernatural powers, cover the Sunday, cover the secrets, isn't it a waste to give me such awesome supernatural powers now? Liu Mingfei smirked in the sea of consciousness, clutching his drowsy forehead, muttering to himself, if you change the cover, how wonderful is Cheng Neng's supernatural powers to help me accelerate mana accumulation. Although he was talking about waste, Lu Mingfei was still very pleasantly surprised. After all, according to the message passed to him by the heavenly book, hiding the sun itself is already the top-level earth evil magical powers. 69 grades, covering the sun will inevitably be included in the first grade, and there are very few earth evil supernatural powers comparable to it. The spells, alchemy, formations, and other knowledge recorded in the Book of Heaven are unknown, and they can be called a vast sea of smoke. Only the magical powers only record a total of 108 kinds of heaven and earth evil. The number of magical powers can be called rare, and contrast spells are like endangered wild species to poultry and livestock. While the number of is scarce, it also means that every kind of magical power has extremely powerful magical effects, such as the earth evil magical powers and sun's shielding that the heavenly book empowered Lu Mingfei just now. Hidden Sun is one of the top magical powers that cover the secrets of heaven in the Book of Heaven. With this magical power to hide the secrets of heaven, the possibility of Lu Mingfei being detected by the art of heaven will be greatly reduced. Unless the difference in cultivation level has reached the point where it is different from the cloud and mud, or the fortune teller himself has the magical powers of divining and arithmetic, almost no one will be able to detect Lu Mingfei's secrets. Hidden Sun itself will always reside on the monk. Once it is completed, there is no need to deliberately display it, and it will automatically avoid the secrets at all times. This level of Earth Shadow Great Divine Ability originally had to at least be qualified to attempt enlightenment at the core formation realm, and usually only a few genius cultivators could really complete the initial cultivation in the formation realm. Most cultivators have to go to a lower realm, relying on realm advantages to get started. Lu Ming could not directly cultivate into the sun, half of it relied on the gods of the heavenly book, and half of it was attributed to the vast vision he had just triggered. The purple chi that surged over the sky was not what he was dreaming about. The reason why he could survive the inverted purple chi intact was because the heavenly book refined the excess purple chi for him. The Book of Heaven has recognized him as the master and has become his magic weapon. As a magic weapon of life, the air of heaven and earth refined through the heavenly book will be transformed into the power of the heavenly book. These powers can be integrated into his Xianguan ancestral aperture, and after a little refining, it can be transformed into his own mana. Similarly, his mana can also nourish the origin of the heavenly book. Long-term nourishment can improve the essence of the heavenly book, and it can also warm up the heavenly book when its source is damaged, so that it can slowly recover. The huge amount of purple energy was injected into his ancestral aperture after being refined by the heavenly book, and he was instinctively refined into his own mana. It's just that the amount of these purple chi is too huge, and the power accumulated after being refined by the heavenly book is also massive. Only a few bits are separated for Lu Mingfei's refining, so that his mana reaches the limit that he can bear. The remaining power is nowhere to be consumed. As a magic weapon, the heavenly book still has some similarities with the monk. For example, like the monk, it can't be fattened by one bite. Although a huge amount of purple energy has been refined, these powers are hardly preserved by the celestial book, and should not be left for a long time, otherwise it will also cause pressure and damage to it. If Lu Mingfei is strong enough, he can treat himself as a water pipe, and transfer the power accumulated in the heavenly book into the mysterious ancestral orifice to refine it into mana, and then transfer the mana to the heavenly book in this way. All the power gained by the purple energy is incorporated into the origin of the heavenly book. But he has just started, after all, his cultivation is too weak. Don't talk about the water pipe. It's hard enough to be a sipper, and it can be regarded as a hollow toothpick if it is dead. Under such circumstances, the Book of Heaven can only find another way and use up this power as soon as possible, so as not to waste it after it can't survive. And the consumption method chosen by the Book of Heaven is the best solution obtained after calculating various plans, or the most cost-effective plan to enlighten Lu Mingfei and hide the sun. Initiating this magical power to Lu Mingfei and exposing a lot of power to cramming him into the entrance, it can almost perfectly exhaust this temporary power, without any surplus or waste. It's a pity that the heavenly book still doesn't seem to be smart enough, Lu Mingfei thought. If the heavenly book can be more spiritual, it should give him a magical power or spell that can accelerate mana accumulation. After all, for a small shrimp in the breath-eating state, the magical power that can cover the heavens is indeed tall enough, but it is actually the effect is not as good as a magical power or spell that can accelerate cultivation. After all, no big man who can detect the secret of heaven will be so idle to spy on the secret of a small shrimp in the breath-eating state, and the magical power of covering the sun is useless at all, not to mention the boy who is suspected of being a monk. Lu Mingfei has never contacted any monks. But a magical power or spell that can accelerate cultivation can make him get out of the fragile shrimp stage faster, and grow to the large lobster stage with a certain monk's means as soon as possible. But he can't expect too much. After 2 initiations, he also vaguely touched the spirituality of the heavenly book. This spirituality seems to be very ignorant, a bit like a child who will act according to certain established rules. But this is just Lu Ming's non-vague feeling, and it may not be accurate. He himself is not very confident. To get the Book of Heaven is already a pie dipped in old Shangzi vinegar. He feels that he has nothing to be dissatisfied with. After all, people have to be content to have a long time. What's more, he has passed the second phase, and now he has no ambitious ambitions, and he is not in a hurry to accomplish some earth-shattering things, and his mentality is leisurely and peaceful. I just don't know if it's an illusion. He always feels that this 108 magical powers seems to have been seen in a certain book before. Even thinking about it, it seems that even the name Hidden Sun is so familiar, just like a pedestrian who was inadvertently glanced at in the crowd one day suddenly appeared in front of him with golden light, and suddenly there is a kind of half-real familiarity. Just thinking about it for a long time, Lu Mingfei didn't expect to see these names anywhere, so he made up his mind to go to the internet cafe to check the internet tonight. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com. He left the sea of consciousness. He didn't know how long he had just been groggy in reality, so it would be better to go out and have a look. Lu Ming sits on the dead tree roots tangled like a giant dragon on a piece of miserable ground. Both the world and Lu Ming's are illusory and translucent, as if they are not real. In the world, there is a small rectangular gap with fine cracks all over the edge in the center of the earth. Lu Ming's small hand squeezed the skin of the dry root under him, and through his translucent fingers, he could see that the skin of the dry root was crushed little by him. His tone and eyes were full of surprise. What happened? Why am I can't perceive my brother's situation at all now. Although he can still enter Lu Mingfei's consciousness now, but other than that, he can no longer perceive everything about Lu Mingfei, even Lu Mingfei can't even perceive it anywhere now. He just took advantage of the jade scroll and slipped into his brother's consciousness. Although he was quickly expelled by the jade slip, at least at that time he could still know what was happening around his brother, and he could also feel his brother's presence. Where from? As a result, the connection between him and his brother was cut off for the most part just now. He now only has the ability to enter his brother's consciousness. But if you want to get into your brother's consciousness, he has to pass the block of that jade slip first. Lu Mingfei's knowledge of the sea. A moment after Lu Mingfei left, in the quiet and peaceful pure white space, a small black figure twisted and emerged. Lu Ming's faced the Book of Heaven, and immediately squeezed a harmless and friendly smile from humans and animals. I think we can talk. The jade slip of the heavenly book was brightly released, and it flew forward and smashed out, so Lu Mingfei's knowledge of the sea was once again restored to its original tranquility and peace. At 3:30 in the morning, the bright moonlight illuminates the empty streets through the light gauze clouds. This city is just a small southern city that is not prosperous. After 1 o'clock in the morning, only the office buildings and commercial streets in the center will be sparsely illuminated and pedestrians. The rest of the city is quietly sleeping. The location of the road itself is remote enough, and it is close to the river, and the guardrail is missing several sections due to disrepair. Even in the daytime, there are few pedestrians, let alone it is not safe at night. Even strong adult men are unwilling to walk this way in the dark, even if they are not afraid of encountering some bad people. If they step on the air and fall, how can it make sense to roll all the way into the river? But under the moonlight, a tall, bumpy figure was reflected on the roadside. In fact, it is not accurate enough to describe this figure with its concavity and convexity, or the degree is far from deep enough. The bumps and bulges of this figure are perfect. The concept of golden ratio is reflected in almost every aspect of this figure's exquisite figure. Even the world's top model and this figure are probably only among the first. Exquisitely good figure, proud long legs. This is undoubtedly the figure of a woman. Under the bright moonlight, the white skin of the woman exposed outside her clothes glows like ivory. She doesn't look very old, but she is in her early 20s, with a very fashionable makeup, bright eyes and red lips, a touch of crimson at the corners of her eyes, a bright red rope tied to her high bun, and her ears hanging down. 2 long dark temples. She is wearing a black round spotted t-shirt from Vero Moda. Most of her long snow-white legs are exposed under Bottega's leather shorts, and a pair of Bottega gabardine fabric dark brown sneakers are stepped on her feet. In such a dark and remote place, it is dangerous for a woman to walk alone at night, not to mention a girl with such a good figure that most models can be ashamed. Such a beauty walks alone on the dark road in cool clothes. It is possible that any man can't help but stretch out his hand to her in the dark. However, Judamai is fearless, and she has never even considered the danger no matter any of her hands. As long as she dares to reach her without permission, she will pull out the small sword on her waist like lightning, and cut it like water. Broken the wrists of both hands. Darkness can't stop her sword, it will help her. As a ninja who has undergone severe training, although Judamai cannot make seals and spit fireballs, she can at least turn the darkness into her loyal friend. If she hides in the shadows, she will become a deadly female of death. The matching of figure and fashionable clothing will often become the last beauty in the eyes of the target. As a ninja, Judamai has endurance and execution power that ordinary people can't match. No matter what task she used in the past, she will complete it perfectly, and this time is no exception. But compared to the previous missions, this is the most puzzled mission performed by Judamai. Her previous missions have also puzzled her, but they have never puzzled her as much as they are today. Stretched out the long white fingers and pressed the headset lightly. After 2 busy sounds, a lazy woman's voice came to mind in the headset. Hello? Long legs, have you arrived at the designated place? The woman's voice was soft, waxy, and lazy, and it was also vaguely mixed with the crisp chewing sound. I got to the potato chips. Judamai moved her long legs and crouched into the dense green belt on the side of the road. The emerald green leaves of summer rubbed against the skin of her clothes, but only a very slight whispering sound was made, I hiding in the bushes on the side of the road with the props. The green belt here is the same as the railing, and it has been left unattended for a long time. But there is a huge difference between living plants and dead objects composed of inorganic substances. After a long period of waste, the railings decayed and aging, but the plants in the green belt were thriving and flourishing. Although their ultimate destiny must be turned into decayed dust under the action of time, at least at this moment, the vibrant green belt and the old mottled railings are indeed as sharp as the red and green in the oil painting. Judamai took 2 steps in the green belt that she called grass, her left hand stretched out slightly, and her fingertips touched the cold, hard iron. The thing is next to me, and it's also in the grass. The thing in her mouth is an iron cage with a height of about 1 meter, 3 to 4 meters, and a length of 1 meter or more each. In the iron cage, a slender figure resembling a gorilla crouched hard, his limbs and joints were bound by chains with a very professional technique, his face was wearing a special mask, as well as his eyes and mouth. Covered. The subtle moonlight shines on it through the gaps in the leaves of the green belt, and the hair is so dark and soft that it can reflect light. Now that I'm hiding, I will speak up. The target has just left the internet cafe. Potato chips. Kaz chewed on the potato chips. A piece of green belt can't cover the big guy. It depends on your words. Be found. Although the woman called potato chips by Judmai was not present, she was right. The savage green belt was already luxuriant enough, but the cage still showed a small section of the top. Now? According to the mission information, it takes 12 to 15 minutes for the target to get here from the internet cafe. Isn't he just out of the bar? Why are you in such a hurry? Judamai wondered. For the sake of safety. Potato Chips plausibly said, everything must be insured. What if he wants to run on a whim today? There are too few cameras in this city, and he will be out of my surveillance range if he walks 2 more. At that time, I will not be able to control his whereabouts in real time. Of course I have to try my best to ensure. I'm Pooh. Judamai sipped, her tone unrestrained. Strive for insurance? You are good to say, but you are not the one who speaks well. You command remotely and move your mouth to strive for insurance. In the end, it is not me who contributes. You? Do you know that my meditational photo has a sequence of 69 on the periodic table of the words and spirits, which is very expensive? Don't come. There was a voice from the potato chips that the puffed food bag was squeezed. How many missions have I remotely assisted you? How much is your meditation consumption? Let me be clear. Quick talk, delay the boss's big business, be careful, I put the responsibility on you. Very good, girl, you are kind, wait to see me swell your ass. Judamai gritted her teeth and threatened, and the deep singing voice flowed from her throat. The language from her mouth was by no means any language that had appeared in human civilization. It was majestic, astringent, complicated and changed in tone. Very rich, this should be a language that communicates efficiently but is extremely difficult to learn. In a short chant, Judamai, the cage next to her, and the creatures in the cage quickly transformed into pitch black. In just a few seconds, their figures were as pitch black as ink, and then the ink disappeared suddenly, as if dripping into it. A bit of ink in the water tank generally fades to invisible. Along with the pitch black, there are also the figure of Judamai, the cage, and the creatures in it. Yanling meditation can form a spherical area around itself, distorting the light in the area, creating an optical invisibility effect. After the release of Ming Zhao, Judamai stopped speaking, and even the breathing sound was gradually reduced under the special technique of the ninja. Ming Zhao is an optical invisibility and does not involve the aspect of sound concealment. Even if Ming Zhao is released, her voice will be transmitted intact. Fortunately, she is a ninja. Ninja has always been very accomplished in hiding, especially in lowering the voice. As for the big guy next to her, the chains, masks, and cages on her body are all specially made, and it won't make any noise when the restraints are not untied. Judamai adjusted his breath and stared at the end of the road intently. About 12 or 3 minutes later, a vague figure emerged from the end of the road, walking in the direction of Judamai. After another 3 or 4 minutes, the figure gradually walked in and became clear. With her excellent strength, Judamai could barely see the figure's face with a distance of about 150 meters. It was a very young and immature face. It looked only 16 or 17 years old. His shoulders were slightly dropped, his back was slightly bent, and his feet were a bit procrastinated. The stride was too small, but he moved quickly and was unusually stable. On the whole, gives people the feeling of a student with little ambition and spirit, but in Judamai, he vaguely felt a kind of detached mood in the depressed young man. A person she had met before gave her a similar feeling. That was when her ninjutsu master took her to visit an old Taoist priest in China. The old Taoist priest was a recluse, and his reclusive place was an unnamed hill only 200 to 300 kilometers away from this small town. She followed her master up the mountain, and walked around the rugged mountain road for a long time in the mountain forest where she was about to become a master. Just when she, the ninja who was about to become a master, was about to be confused, she and master finally climbed to the top of the mountain. I saw a small courtyard surrounded by a wall of soil, and two pitted wooden gates in the mountains. In the courtyard is a small house made of adobe bricks, and a simple temple made of adobe. In the temple are immortal tablets hand-carved with irregular wooden boards. The small altar table in front of the tablets is covered with two cheap chemical fiber non-woven red fabrics. When she and the master arrived, the old Taoist priest was chopping wood, his complexion was ruddy, his face was wrinkled, his grey beard drooped more than a foot long, and the old Taoist swayed with his axe. There was an old tree in the yard that she could not recognize, and an old yellow dog with a bald head was tied to the old tree. Everything in this small yard is full of shabby and rudimentary. Even the robes of the old Taoist priests are covered with patches. Although they are all cloths of the same color, the stitch marks of the patches are still obvious. In this small yard that was so simple that the ancients would shake their heads and call it miserable, her ninjutsu was called the best in Japan, and the master knelt down in front of the old Taoist priest, took her to say hello respectfully, and then stood up for the old Taoist humbly. After cutting the firewood, I went to the distant river to pick up 7 buckets of water and came back. Judamai waited boringly beside him, completely unable to see what was special about this old Taoist priest, who deserved his master's respect. She felt that the old yellow dog, which was tied to a tree in the distance, looked too old to live long, but its eyes were very human and smart, and even gave her the feeling of facing a person. In the evening, the master got up and walked to the adobe temple with the old Taoist priest. She followed indifferently and watched the old Taoist fetch a bundle of incense from nowhere, and one by one offered incense to the gods in the temple. The moment the old Taoist inserted the first 3-pillar incense into the crock used as the incense burner, the old and inexperienced old Taoist in Judamai's eyes suddenly seemed to have changed his person, and his every move was full of solemn charm. As if there really were gods descending on him at that moment, he gave incense to several other gods one by one. The old yellow dog tied to the tree sat motionless on the ground. In Judamai's eyes, the leaves of the old tree in the courtyard rustled by the wind seemed to suddenly calm down, and the adobe temple seemed to be covered with a layer of gold. The clouds lifted underneath. Every time the old Taoist respected incense, the solemn and majestic charm of her body increased once. After several times of respecting incense, she seemed to no longer be a pale-faced old man, but a majestic atmosphere between her actions. Gods. After the old Taoist worshipped the last 3 incense sticks, the charm and prestige on his body were gone. In the eyes of Judamai, he was still the ordinary white-bearded old Tao. The leaves of the old tree were still rustling, and the old yellow dog by the tree was long gone. Lie down and fall asleep. Everything seemed to be an illusion of Judamai. She even wondered if the old Taoist priest had secretly medicine in the water she and her master drank. Judamai has never been there again after leaving, but the godlike weather and majesty have made her unforgettable for a long time. The intensive dragging of footsteps made Judamai regain her senses, and the boy had reached a place only 180 meters away in front of her. At the moment when I saw the teenager, Judamai was immersed in the memories for a short time. Although the sense of detachment given by the teenager and the dignity of the old Taoist were not intuitively similar, she felt that the difference was inexplicably different. The persons may be the same thing in nature. But after all, this is just her feeling, she herself doesn't quite believe it, and it won't affect her at all. Hidden in the realm of underworld photos, Judamai focused on the face of the teenager. With her eyesight, 180 meters is no different from the 12 meters in the eyes of ordinary people. She can clearly see Liu Mingfei's face. Unlike before, I could barely tell that the face was so green. Judamai could see the details on the boy's face clearly. Slightly fair skin, slightly drooping outer corners of the eyes, fairly straight nose, and not thin or thick, but the lip shape is not very good-looking lips. Such a face is not a handsome man in the eyes of the well-informed Zhu Demai, at least it can bear a good looking. But Zhu Demai doesn't care whether this boy is good looking or not. After seeing the photos in the mission profile, she has determined that this boy is her mission target. Lu Mingfei. Zhu Demai's slender arm passed through the gap between the iron cage railings, and gently pressed on the mask of the big guy, and then pressed down a certain protrusion. The eyes of the mask opened silently. With the change of the mask, the blinded eyes of the big guy were liberated. Through the small gaps opened in the mask, a pair of hot eyes but with snake-like creatures' cold and vertical pupils reflected in the moonlight. Golden cold light was walking on the road, frowning because of the information he found a few hours ago. Lu Mingfei, who was lost in thought, suddenly raised his head and looked at a green belt tens of meters ahead. Don't know why, he just had a strange feeling that there were eyes staring at him. People's thinking and courage are very wonderful things. Sometimes a person's sudden and inexplicable idea will have a very big impact on them. For example, when walking at night, as long as you don't think about the weird things on the road, focus on the road and some business affairs, even if you play with your phone for a while to distract your thinking, people will not feel that the night is scary. But once the idea of is there eyes looking at me behind me /corner/bush, or is there something hiding there, even if I immediately turn on the game on my phone to remedy it, my brain will still subconsciously fantasize in those places. Eyes or something, and then I feel more and more weird in the surrounding environment. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com scared himself to death in the end. This is the situation of Lu Mingfei at this moment. Together with the idea of there are eyes in the green belt, Lu Mingfei feels that there are eyes in the green belt more and more, even if he knows it is impossible intellectually, even if he has mana yesterday. But thinking, or imagination, is really not something that can be controlled by control. Even though this road has been walked more than once at night, Lu Mingfei still couldn't help but flutter with his thoughts. Lu Mingfei's hair on his body suddenly rose, and his steps slowed subconsciously, but this was the nearest way home. He had already walked more than half of it, and he couldn't turn back and change his way now. Anyway, it's a psychological effect, and it's okay if you walk over it quickly. With this mentality, Lu Mingfei quickened his pace and walked forward, unable to help but stare at the green belt as he walked. Just when Lu Mingfei was less than a dozen meters away from the green belt, in his line of sight, two golden lights suddenly lit up in the green belt. The next moment, those two golden lights swayed up and down and rushed towards him. Behind the golden lights was a body that resembled a human nature, reflecting light on the surface, and rushing on all fours. The monster with golden eye pupils is extremely fast, accelerating from a standstill at a distance of more than 10 meters, and in less than 2 seconds, it rushes in front of Lu Mingfei, and a sharp claw with a nail that is 10 centimeters long rises high. Suddenly, an imaginary monster really popped out of his sight, and he rushed to the front door. At that moment, Lu Mingfei didn't react at all, watching the monster rush in front of him, raising his paws, and the dull dark pupils suddenly shine bright golden light, majestic and full. Lu Mingfei's left arm swung subconsciously, and the mana in the ancestral aperture flowed to the arm as he pleased, and the swung arm turned into a whistling phantom in an instant. The sound of dull fists and physical clashes broke the silence of the streets late at night. Lu Mingfei maintained a non-standard punching posture with a dazed expression. The black image of the tall humanoid who had pounced on him was subjected to a huge impact, and he staggered back 7 or 8 meters, lying on all fours, with sharp claws on the asphalt. There were a few less obvious scratches on the road. Lu Mingfei, who was stunned by the sudden attack and frightened for 2 seconds, came back to his senses, and looked in front of him on all fours in shock, shaking the black-shaped monster in a guard posture. A part of the mana in the ancestral aperture spontaneously flowed into the spiritual platform, making Lu Mingfei's originally chaotic mood suddenly calmer, his thinking suddenly became clearer, and his attention suddenly concentrated. Lu Mingfei, who lights up the golden pupil, clearly saw the whole picture of the monster by the still clear moonlight. He glanced across the green belt and railings on both sides of the road, roughly in contrast with the height of the monster. Compared to humans, the posture of this monster is actually more similar to the orangutans he saw in zoos and television. According to Liu Mingfei's biological knowledge, a small number of mutant individuals and legendary animals that are uncertain whether they actually exist, the largest orangutan should be the gorilla, and the adult gorilla is usually 0.85 meters in the four-legged state. Up and down, up to 1.6 to 1.8 meters tall when standing. This monster is also on all fours, with a height of at least 1 meter at the shoulder, and its erect height is definitely 2 meters away, which is a lot taller than the gorilla. But compared to the majestic and mighty gorilla in Liu Mingfei's memory, this monster is obviously much slender. Its body is more like a strong human being. This monster was covered with dark hair. The hair was so soft that it seemed to reflect the moonlight, but Liu Mingfei found that it was not soft hair that reflected the moonlight, but the hair under the monster hair that was close to the skin. A layer of scales like snake scales. The monster is covered with fine black scales, fangs, and sharp claws, which is obviously very dangerous. But Liu Mingfei is not very afraid of it. This is not because of how good his mental qualities or how rich his combat experience is as a freshman in high school. But because of his night vision ability and excellent eyesight, he clearly saw the dark red blood dripping from the monster's shoulders. The monster is standing on the ground with all fours on the ground, but if you look closely, you will find that the monster's left claw is just clenched into a fist and stuck on the ground without real effort. Because of its left shoulder, there is a deep depression of the fist mark. At the position of the fist mark, the scales attached to the skin have long disappeared. Only scattered fragments are stuck to the vague flesh and blood, and the scales around the fist mark also extend out 7-8 cracks. The dark red blood oozes from the fuzzy flesh and blood of the fist mark and the crevices of the surrounding scales, dripping on the road in a patter, and even accumulates into a small blood puddle. It was this small patch of blood that gave Liu Mingfei a lot of confidence. The monster was standing on the ground with its 3 limbs. The cold and tyrannical golden eyes dimmed a lot, and the humanized fear and suspense replaced the original tyranny and killing intent. The monster stared at Liu Mingfei fiercely, staggering and dare not step forward. Zhu Demai in the green belt opened his eyes wide, and tried his best to restrain the heartbeat accelerated by surprise. This dead waiter was carefully selected by the potato chip girl, and the risk is at least level B in the secret party standard. It needs an excellent complete dragon slaying team to make sure that it is eliminated. Although Zhu Demai can pick up a knife and chop the dead waiter like melons and vegetables, but that is because she is a powerful mixed blood with a unified blood flow, and has also undergone severe training, and the sequence of the spirit is also quite high. Even so, she must rely on her hard-honed fighting skills and sharp and tough alchemy weapons in her hand to kill this dead pool. If she confronts the enemy with her bare hands, she will definitely choose to speak out and run away. The boy in front of him looks like he is only 16 or 17 years old. There is no sign of training on his body. Even the way he punches is extremely non-standard. It just seemed to be relying on brute force to directly swing so fast that she could even see him. The unclear punch caused a lot of trauma to this dead pool, who was as dangerous as grade B. How powerful is this punch? Regardless of the strength and tolerance of the flesh and blood body, the limit punch of the heavyweight professional boxing champion is probably nothing more than this, right? Zhu Demai is speechless. What's more frightening is that the boy's punching posture is very non-standard, and his brute force is estimated to have only played more than half of the point. Relying on explosive skills to punch such a punch that exceeds the limit of humans, most boxers have to withstand severe muscles. The serious consequences of strains and dislocation fractures of the wrist bones require you to lie down and rest your food after a punch. But for Liu Mingfei, who completely relies on his physical fitness and throws his punches out of order, as long as his endurance matches this physical fitness, this kind of powerful fist must not be difficult to make another 20 or 30 minutes. If he has received formal training, even if he doesn't have any clever fighting or force skills, as long as he can hit the punch just right and hit Deadpool's head righteously, it is estimated that the Deadpool's corpse has already begun. It's cold. Or his power skills can be half of his own, even if the punch is only hitting the Deadpool's shoulder, it is estimated to be hemiplegic. It will not allow him to retain part of his fighting power like it is now, so that it is difficult to win or lose. Material. Yes, although in Judamai's opinion, the physical quality of this young boy completely suppressed Deadpool, but as a boy who has no experience in combat, or even fighting experience, Lu Mingfei may not be able to kill it. This Deadpool. It's like humans' combat effectiveness is theoretically crushing geese and native dogs, but most people are still driven by these two in the countryside. After all, for humans living in a peaceful and civilized environment, and if a goose or a dog does it, even if it breaks the blood, it will be lost to the sky by itself. But if a normal adult is really pressed into urgency, there is a high probability that a goose or a local dog can be sent to heaven on the spot by just kicking it in anger, even if it is next to a pet hospital that cannot be rescued. But Deadpool is not a goose or a dog after all. Even if it bites a person, it can only hurt the flesh. Deadpool's fangs and claws are fatal to a flesh and blood body. No matter how powerful this flesh and blood body can burst out, it will be torn apart in front of the hard teeth and claws. The killing instinct flows in the blood of the Deadpool's body. Once Lu Mingfei is injured, it may be a fatal injury to his throat or heart. Even if he is an ordinary young man who grew up in a city, his ferocity is stimulated. There is no chance to redeem it. The only thing Judamai can't figure out is why a young man with such great power seems to have no fighting skills at all. Is his terrifying power naturally grown by the excellent dragon blood in his body, without any training? Judamai can hardly believe this speculation. Although Lu Mingfei's dazzling golden pupils must be of a high level of blood, after all, there is a limit to the blood of mixed races, and it is impossible to be too exaggerated. In any case, being able to possess this kind of brute force is enough to prove that Lu Mingfei's pedigree has far surpassed most mixed races. The physical quality of his youth. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com is already a height that most mixed races cannot reach in their lifetime. Is a terrible genius. Judamai suppressed the shock in his heart, staring scorchingly at Lu Mingfei and Deadpool who were facing each other on the road. She can't really let Lu Mingfei be killed by Deadpool. Her task is to send this hypnotized and brainwashed Deadpool to Lu Mingfei, put Lu Mingfei in danger, and then rescue him at the right opportunity. Kill him and kill the dead waiter by the way. Although she doesn't know what the meaning of this task is, whether she wants her to show this young potential boy a beauty plan to draw him into her own camp, but she is currently quite sure that Lu Mingfei can't die. Although Lu Mingfei has shown great physical fitness, she still dislikes this untrained young man with a mentality of ordinary people. She is now waiting for Lu Mingfei to panic and be reversed by Deadpool, and then she can go to the rescue. But to her surprise, she did not see the slightest panic or fear on Lu Mingfei's face. Lu Mingfei just stared at Deadpool quietly. From the expression, he even had more time to think. Mana flows in the Lingtai. Lu Mingfei's thinking is clearer than ever, and his spirit is completely concentrated, analyzing the current situation as much as possible. If it hadn't had the mana to keep the spiritual platform clear and bright, he might have turned his head and fled while yelling in horror at this moment. But now the mana is circulating in the spirit platform. As long as he has a little negative emotion in his heart, he will be immediately suppressed, allowing him to keep calm and rational at all times. Lu Mingfei suspects that human beings might do the same if they were given a lot of adrenaline. And after a short period of rational thinking, Lu Mingfei feels that he has a great chance of winning. On the dark street, Lu Mingfei and the monster confronted each other quietly. Neither party seemed to mean to do it immediately. Deadpool is indeed dragging time. Although its IQ has dropped significantly compared to when it was a human, it still retains a little bit. As long as it is not stimulated by dragon blood, it is at least smarter than ordinary beasts. Maybe worse than primates like gorillas. But it can at least distinguish the gap between the enemy and ourselves, and also knows its own advantages. After being corroded by dragon blood for a long time, its IQ is no longer enough to support its use of weapons and tools, and it can't even use the spirit of speech, but the result is a greatly improved physical fitness, which is closer to the instinct of beasts. Reaction, and strong self-healing ability. Fresh and hot dragon blood flowed in its body. After exceeding the 50% bloodline critical point, the dragon blood in its body was fully released, the cell activity was greatly increased, and the wound on the shoulder stopped bleeding in just 2 minutes. Even the minor muscle damage has been repaired to a certain extent. Now its arm can show some strength. If it can recover for a few minutes, this arm can even swing freely. But it is not something that can be done in a short time if you want to completely recover. After all, it is just a dead pool, and the bloodline before the dead pool is not very high. Dragon blood may indeed be omnipotent, but the premise is that the bloodline is high enough. Liu Mingfei also saw that Deadpool's wound had stopped bleeding. Although he could not see the deeper muscles being repaired, he had also realized that this monster had a strong self-healing ability. But Liu Mingfei did not intend to break the deadlock and pursue the victory, because he was waiting for the recovery of mana. The punch he just slammed almost fully, and the mana in his body was reduced by nearly 1/10. Zhu Demai thinks that Liu Mingfei's punch just depends entirely on his physical fitness, and feels that with such a strong body's endurance, he can easily hit 20 or 30 punches with all his strength. But in reality, Liu Mingfei knows very well in his heart that if every punch maintains the previous mana consumption, then he will have to stop cooking at most 12 or 3 punches. When the mana is exhausted, he does not feel that he is relying on his own flesh and blood. The body can just overtake this monster. Fortunately, his mana recovery speed is not slow. In just 2 minutes, the mana he just consumed has already recovered a half. Liu Mingfei uses half of his energy to guard against the monsters in front of him, and half of his energy to perform the exercises silently. After another 3 minutes or so, he should be able to recover all the mana he consumes, but the monster's injury is obviously not completely healed in 3 minutes. As a high school student, Liu Mingfei, who has never fought so much, feels that if he drags it so, he makes a profit without losing money. He has not considered that if he takes advantage of the inability of Deadpool to attack at this moment, he will give him a few more points. It has new injuries that are more inconvenient, and the battle will be more favorable to him. So in the eyes of Zhu Demai, the high school student who was full of flaws and the dead waiter who could hack to death with 2 knives were caught in a weird serious confrontation. What kind of mastery do you two kaiji put this deep? Do you have other tricks besides pecking at each other? Zhu Demai feels that it is necessary to teach him what it means to kill you while you are sick after saving Liu Mingfei. After another 3 minutes, Liu Mingfei, who had recovered his mana, made a brazen move, separated a small part of his mana and transported it on his legs flicked, and 2 steps spanned the distance of 7 or 8 meters from Deadpool, swinging his fist towards it hit the monster's forehead in front of him. Judoku Mai hidden in the grass frowned subconsciously. The body and head of the monster that was approached by Liu Mingfei's fist turned silently, and suddenly leaned forward. Liu Mingfei's mana was so strong that his powerful punch actually rubbed the monster's forehead dangerously and missed it. Liu Mingfei's body was directly imbalanced with a fist, and there was no time to adjust his posture. The monster had already bullied himself and rushed into his arms. The monster more than 2 meters high suddenly exerted force and directly pushed Liu Mingfei's unbalanced body slightly off the ground. And then the arm that was intact was swiped up, and from Liu Mingfei's lower abdomen, it slanted across his shoulders. The slanted claws made Liu Mingfei's slightly lifted body be thrown directly behind the monster, but the monster was obviously not ready to let Liu Mingfei out of its attack range. Just as Liu Mingfei's calf was about to fly over its head in midair, the monster's injured flashlight stretched out like a flint on the top of his head, and firmly clasped Liu Mingfei's ankle and the muscles that had been injured in his shoulders. Ignoring the pain outrageously, he moved his arms forward, clasped his ankles, and slammed Liu Mingfei's posture on the asphalt road with his back on the ground. The whole action is smooth and clean, as if it is not a dead pool whose reason has been eroded by dragon blood, but a skilled and experienced fighter master. A dull crash sounded from Liu Mingfei's back and the surface of the asphalt road. The right hand of Jude Mai in the green belt had already been tightly gripped on the handle of the kodaki on the left side of his waist. The kodaki at the waist was thrown out like a strong arrow from the string, cutting off Deadpool's cervical spine, making it immediately paralyzed, and stopping any movement. From the professional point of view of Jude Mai, ordinary people will be paralyzed for life even if they are left on the ground by chance. Even with Liu Mingfei's physical injury, he will definitely suffer serious injuries. Now his situation is dangerous enough. Then it was time for her to save the scene. The Deadpool who smashed Liu Mingfei on the ground didn't know that he would be pierced through the cervical spine by the alchemy kodaki that was thrown by Jude Mai at any time, and its stroke was not over yet. The paw that clasped Liu Mingfei's ankle did not loosen, but directly pulled Liu Mingfei's ankle back. The shoulder that had caused the wound and spurting blood again exerted force, pulling Liu Mingfei diagonally upwards towards himself. The other sharp claw protruded forward and pointed directly at Liu Mingfei's throat. The throat is one of the most fragile places on the human body. Deadpool's claws are as strong as metal, and at this moment Liu Mingfei is also dragged towards Deadpool, which in a disguised form increases the speed at which Deadpool's claws protrude. If one claw is firmly grasped, Liu Mingfei's trachea may be torn out immediately. At the moment, Jude Mai was about to throw the sword from her waist. Liu Mingfei, who was supposed to be in a seriously injured state, suddenly exerted force on her waist. His entire upper body was twisted at an angle of 90 degrees while tilting back. The chin and neck are almost in a straight line, which can be avoided by the protruding sharp claws. Then Liu Mingfei exerted force on his waist again, one arm clasped the inside of the wrist of Deadpool's sharp claw, and the other arm pressed the outside of the elbow joint connecting the big arm and the forearm. Both arms outrageously exerted relative force. Click! It sounded as if the wet branches were being broken, and Deadpool's intact arm was turned back 90 degrees. A stern roar sounded, and the violent pain of the elbow being completely abolished made Deadpool crazy, but Liu Mingfei's counterattack was not over yet. His uncaught leg straightened suddenly and kicked Deadpool on the shoulder wound. Deadpool, whose wound was severely wounded, immediately lost his strength, grabbing Liu Mingfei's ankle paws and letting them go. Liu Mingfei landed on both feet, and the hand that had previously been pressed on the outside of Deadpool's elbow was also clasped with the other hand. On his wrists, his feet staggered, his waist twisted flexibly, and the whole person clasped Deadpool's claws and turned twice in a dance-like posture. Liu Mingfei turned twice, and Deadpool's forearm, whose elbow joint was abolished, also followed him twice. The muscle fibers that had lost bone support at the joint were twisted off, and the elbow showed a hideous twisted posture. Lost the muscle fibers and joints and ligaments of the elbow is extremely fragile. Liu Mingfei clasped Deadpool's claws with left and right hands alternately exerting force, twisted Deadpool's forearm twice, and then suddenly pulled back. Deadpool's forearm was torn off by Liu Mingfei abruptly, revealing broken bone stubble, twisted muscle fibers and visible vascular nerve sections at the fracture. Zinchao threw Deadpool's torn off forearm under his feet. Liu Ming stood steadily, and dark red blood flowed from the cross-section of Deadpool's forearm, soaking the solace of Liu Mingfei's shoes. The t-shirt on his body has 3 long damages from his lower abdomen to his shoulders. The white skin is almost as long as the damage of the clothes and the wound is slightly bleeding. He raised his eyes to look at Deadpool, who was kneeling and crawling on the ground because of the intense pain. He slowly stepped forward 2 steps. The corners of his mouth split, revealing 2 rows of neat white teeth. The pupils under his eyes looked like melting gold. On a scoop of bright red blood. Kneeling and crawling on the ground, the trembling Deadpool caught a glimpse of these eyes, and then the trembling became more severe. The dull impact sounded again, the huge monster figure flew out horizontally, and Lu Mingfei slowly retracted his right leg from the horizontal whip. 5 meters away, the left side of the monster was deeply sunken. Judoka Mai in the green belt subconsciously moved her elbow slightly, and looked away from her forearm that was torn from the ground. She felt pain when she looked at it. Judamai's gaze shifted to Lu Mingfei, who was standing quietly, as if he had seen a real monster. Lu Mingfei stood there and was silent for a while, his blood-gold eyes gradually calmed down into the otherwise plain black pupils. After a while, he silently picked up the half-cut arm at his foot and threw it into the river next to it. Splashed a small piece of water. Judamai's heart trembled in the green belt. Was thrown directly into the river with the flesh and blood of dragon blood? Even if the owner of this flesh and blood is just a dead pool with a dangerous degree of B, the creatures in the river will probably suffer. Just when Judamai felt a headache for Lu Mingfei, the layman's handling of Deadpool's corpse, she saw Lu Mingfei walking towards Deadpool's corpse silently. Judamai's heart trembled. Fuck. You don't mean to. A cluster of large water splashes splashed from the surface of the river, and the ripples swayed fiercely, just like the mood of Judamai. Throwing the corpse of the monster down the river, Lu Mingfei sat on the road, his mana returned to the ancestor's aperture from the spiritual platform, his original calm and rational state, and his negative emotions severed instantly disappeared. Fear, shock, loss, despair, anger, fear. Countless emotions occupy his brain. Then Judamai saw this boy who had just killed a glass Deadpool boy with a rather cruel method. At this moment, he lay silently on the road, holding his head and shaking. Judamai? What happened? What happened? Who is the little white rabbit lying on the road with a face I'm so afraid I'm going to be scared to death? Didn't you kill a dead waiter just now? Why do you want to pose in this pose? Isn't it the dead servant who has been sent to heaven by you to pose in this pose? Do you know how much pain it caused by you before it died? Are you mocking it in this pose? Judamai wanted to grab Lu Mingfei's collar and vomit, but she thought about it carefully. The day she killed Deadpool for the first time, she seemed to curl up and shake her head like Lu Mingfei at night. The only difference is probably that she was on the soft big bed in her bedroom and turned on the lights in the whole room. And Lu Mingfei was on a cold and hard road, and there were no lights beside him, only the moon and stars were willing to light him up. Judamai felt a little bit of pain to the teenager, but it was obviously not the time for her to show up. She should wait until Lu Mingfei came over by herself and left, so as not to be caught by the dead waiter's cage beside her. After Lu Mingfei leaves, the potato chips guys will come to retrieve this cage. Maybe they have to retrieve the Deadpool corpse in the river by the way. Judamai maintained Ming Zhao, quietly watching Lu Mingfei trembling in the moonlight. When Judamai studied Chinese, he learned a Tang poem called Jing Ye Si. The poet named Li Bai wrote in the poem, "The moon is shining in front of the bed, suspected to be frost on the ground." She thought the poem was catchy. I kept writing it down. Now that the cold moonlight is shining on Ma Lu and Lu Mingfei, it really looks like frost from Judamai's eyes. So in her eyes, Lu Mingfei, lying in the moonlight holding his head trembling, was a bit like a child trembling in the thin frost and snow. His face was pale, and his side was cold, without a trace of temperature. The white frost covered him, and he shivered in the frost. Suddenly, Judamai heard the slight engine noise. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. There will be pedestrians so late on such a remote road? Potato Chips News choice of place is really unreliable. Judamai complained in her heart. The sound of the engine is getting louder and louder from far to near. Accompanied by the sound of the engine, there are orange-yellow car headlights. The car was approaching quickly, and the orange lights brightened rapidly, like a burning fire. Crunch! A sharp brake sounded, and the car stopped 4 or 5 meters in front of Liu Mingfei. It was a royal blue BMW X3, the roaring engine resembled a lowly roaring beast in the night. Liu Mingfei, immersed in his emotions, didn't realize that a car was coming until the BMW brakes. Instead of holding his head and shaking, he lay on the ground and raised his head to look at the car. The orange headlights hit Liu Mingfei, covering the cold moonlight, and it looked like a flame had melted the cold frost covering him, so he no longer shivered from the cold. The back door of the car was opened, and a girl in a red dress jumped out of the car. Under the moonlight, it burst out like a fire, and the fire leaped forward to Liu Mingfei. Liu Mingfei? It's really you. Why are you here? Where did you get such a big wound? The girl exclaimed, turning her head to the car and shouting, Uncle Yang, Uncle Li, come down and help, he is my classmate. The two middle-aged men had walked out of the driver's seat and the passenger's seat quickly. Hearing the girl's cry, they put the bewildered Liu Mingfei into the back seat together. The girl also got into the back seat and closed the car door banging. The royal blue BMW X3 whizzed away. Leaving Zhu Demai in the green belt was shocked for a long time. After recovering, he yelled anxiously at the headset and asked the other side to send someone to deal with the dead waiter's body in the river. Liu Mingfei felt like he was wrapped in thick blood that was close to solidification. The rust-like smell completely occupied his sense of smell. His vision was muddy and dark red. He seemed to be bound up and down, and wanted to move a little bit. Both need to withstand great resistance. This feeling made him very uncomfortable. Whether it was the smell of blood between his mouth and nose or the blocking sensation on his limbs, he was uncomfortable, so he subconsciously used the mana to flow all over his body, wanting to get out of it with the blessing of mana. Mana gushes out of ancestral aperture, and Liu Mingfei wakes up suddenly. What Liu Mingfei's bandaged upper body suddenly straightened out of the bed, driving the thin silk quilt covering him to soar forward for a short period of time. Mana flowed in the spirit platform, and Liu Mingfei's drowsiness when he woke up suddenly receded like a tide. Liu Mingfei looked around. The surrounding walls, decorations, and furniture, as well as the soft and elastic mattress under him and the silky silk quilt corners on hand, all proved that this is not what he used to share with Liu Ming's. That kennel-like bedroom. Hey? What's the sound? The girl's crisp voice resounded outside the closed bedroom door. It was full of breath and very pleasant to hear, but the voice was slightly higher, which seemed a bit ostentatious. Liu Mingfei? Are you awake? Liu Mingfei was taken aback, he was so familiar with this voice. He has confided with the owner of this voice more than once, and their grievances have been settled since he enrolled in the first year of high school. But why is she outside? This is her house? Along with Liu Mingfei's doubts, a vague memory jumped into his mind. Suddenly, he seemed to see a young girl in a fiery red dress walking towards him in the warm orange light, surrounded by the cold moonlit darkness. He looked up against the light. Under the light and red skirt, the girl was like a fairy hiding in the flames. Then, he seemed to be carried to the hospital in a daze. Aren't you awake? Talking in sleep. The girl's crisp voice outside the room sounded again, Liu Mingfei, I will go in if you stop talking. Wait, wait. Liu Mingfei didn't care where he was now or how he came here. He yelled in a panic, wait for me to put on a dress. Liu Mingfei saw that he was scratched by the t-shirt beside the bed, picked it up and hurriedly tried to put it on. Click! Just as Liu Mingfei was about to put his head into the collar of his clothes, the door handle was unscrewed by a long, white hand. Su Xiaoao opened the door and came in. He just saw Liu Mingfei put the t-shirt on his head, and his slender and sharp eyebrows wrinkled immediately. You are like a zongzi. What kind of clothes are you wearing? Lie down quickly and be careful of the wound opening. Seeing Su Xiaoao coming in, Liu Mingfei's mind was empty, and when Su Xiaoao opened his mouth, he suddenly realized that his body seemed to be wrapped in a bandage, and there was indeed a slender area in front of him from the lower abdomen to the shoulder that was aching. Lu Mingfei looked down at his upper body. Except for the two arms, the front of the upper body was basically covered with bandages below his neck. Turning his head to look back, only a small patch of white skin was exposed on his back. It's all bandages. Now Lu Mingfei understands why the girl Su Xiaoao opened the door and walked in without evasiveness. He is bandaged, and there are not as many sports boys wearing basketball vests and sweating on the basketball court in summer. Su Xiaoao really has nothing to do. Taboo. Lu Mingfei put down the short-sleeved t-shirt in his hand, looked at Su Xiaoao who was standing at the door, and uttered a word for a long time. This is your home. Su Xiaoao raised his brows and uttered a rhetorical answer. That can still be your home. Lu Mingfei twitched the corners of his mouth, and was about to fight back, suddenly remembering that this is also an alternative. Being under the fence, it is better to converge. Fortunately, you met me on the road. Su Xiaoao closed the door easily, walked to the bedside table, opened the door and took out a paper cup with a delicate light red iris pattern printed on the outer wall, put it on the bedside table, picked up the kettle on the floor and poured water into the paper cup, and the white mist rose. While performing these actions, Su Xiaoao continued to speak, with a confused tone. I don't know what you did at night. When Uncle Yang and Uncle Li sent you to the hospital, the doctor said that your wound was more than 40 centimeters in length. Fortunately, it was only less than half a centimeter in depth and the bleeding had stopped. It's not serious. Su Xiaoao put down the thermos and handed the paper cup that was 8/4 full of hot water to Lu Mingfei. Here, have some hot water. Lu Mingfei was flattered, stretched out his hands to take the paper cup respectfully, and carefully avoided Su Xiaoao's fingers. Lu Mingfei is indeed a little thirsty, feels the temperature of the water across the wall of the cup, and drank it straight up. I don't know where your home is, and there is no contact information for your family. We are not at ease to leave you alone in the hospital, so we will take you back to my home for now. Watching Lu Mingfei drink the hot water after all, Su Xiaoao took out an empty paper cup and poured water. You are lucky, it just happens that there is a guest room in my house that was just cleaned up 2 days ago. Damn! Why are you taking another one? Wouldn't it be alright to put it here? Don't waste paper cups. Looking at Su Xiaoao taking another paper cup, Lu Mingfei suddenly said with sorrow, as if Su Xiaoao had not taken a new paper cup to pour water, but was using the mother tree de hongbao to boil tea eggs. Hee hee. Su Xiaoyan rolled his eyes at Lu Mingfei, sneered, and took a sip of the filled paper cup to his lips. Do you think I poured it for you? Lu Mingfei blinked silently, wondering if it would seem less embarrassing to wrap himself in that thin quilt now. Give it to me. Su Xiaoao stretched out his hand to Lu Mingfei. What? Lu is clearly puzzled. Your cup. Su Xiaoao looked at the fool's expression. Has your brain also been hurt? Lu Mingfei only then reacted, and quickly said, I'll do it myself. Don't talk nonsense. Su Xiaoyan snatched the paper cup in Lu Mingfei's hand. You'll see blood in the wound afterwards. Don't you have to take you to the hospital? Do you want to trouble me? Lu Mingfei hurriedly shook his head. Here, drink. Su Xiaoyan handed the paper cup filled with water to Lu Mingfei. Drink slowly, don't choke you to death. When the wound is coughed and cracked, you will suffer and I will suffer. The image of me in your eyes is a trash that can even choke on drinking water. Lu Mingfei rolled his eyes and took a sip from the water glass. It's actually a bit more wasteful. Su Xiaoao took a sip of water, squinted and smiled. Lu Mingfei almost choked. Let me see the time. Su Xiaoao raised the wrist with the watch. It was a Charm Series watch from VCA. The dial was silver white, surrounded by a circle of diamonds shining brightly under the sunlight coming in through the window, and the black crocodile leather strap was lined with it. Su Xiaoao's wrists became whiter. Su Xiaoao raised his eyebrows at Lu Mingfei. It's 11:30, you can really sleep. 11:30. Lu Mingfei almost got out of bed, holding his head and wailing, it's over. Auntie will kill me. Auntie. Su Xiaoyan quickly grasped the point, and subconsciously wanted to ask, why is it your aunt? He closed his mouth as soon as he opened his mouth. She reflected that the answer to this question may not be very good, so it is better not to ask. You can call her and make up a reasonable excuse, and I will let Uncle Yang try to cooperate with you to fool around. Uncle Yang. Lu Mingfei was taken aback. If he remembers correctly, this is the third time he has heard this name since last night. My housekeeper, Su Xiaoao explained, and immediately added, Uncle Li is the driver. Evil rich people live, Lu Mingfei sighed, wondering, you send me to the hospital and I can treat it as humanitarian aid, then why are you helping me fool my aunt? Su Xiaoao smiled wittily, when it comes to fooling parents and teachers, students should always stand on the united front. The heroine is righteous. Lu Mingfei held his fist and saluted Su Xiaoao. I am overflattered. Su Xiaoao clasped his fists in return. Lu Mingfei and Su Xiaoao looked at each other, and suddenly laughed together after 2 seconds of silence. After laughing for a while, Su Xiaoao grabbed the paper cup in Mingfei's hand again, poured the water, and when Lu Mingfei took it, put down the kettle and said, I just finished lunch, now I'm going to take a nap to fool you. Auntie's affairs later, you can think of an excuse and go directly to the living room to find Uncle Li. I have already told him in advance, and he will cooperate with you. Su Xiaoao adjusted the scattered bangs in front of his forehead and turned to walk towards the door. Right, she turned her head suddenly, I don't like being interrupted during lunch break, so, Xiao Mingzi, you know. The call of Xiao Mingzi. Lu Mingfei widened his eyes. Just as he was about to say something, Su Xiaoao squinted his eyes, curled his slender eyelashes, and said again, don't forget that you still need Uncle Yang's cooperation. Xiao, Ming, son. Zh. Su Xiaoao closed the door of the guest room and walked to the middle-aged man in the living room who sorted out the goblet. The middle-aged man wears a black tuxedo with a straight back and a meticulous movement. His temples are white but very neat. Uncle Yang, my classmate will come out and please cooperate with him later, just as I said before. Su Xiaoao walked to Uncle Yang and said. Okay, miss. Uncle Yang nodded, and then curiously said, Miss, did you ask that little gentleman how he was injured? The doctor said that the wound on his body was very strange, and he couldn't think of what it was like. In order to create such a long and shallow wound. He was so scared as Beijing who saw a tiger last night. How dare I ask him, I'm afraid that when I ask, he will wet the bed when he thinks of something. Su Xiaoao shook his head and said, you have to expose people's scars. Wait until the wound is completely healed before revealing it, or else what should I do if the wound is bleeding? Yes, Uncle Yang nodded, would you like to prepare some lunch for your classmate? Get ready, you should be hungry after lying down for so long. Su Xiaoao nodded. What about you? Uncle Yang asked. Su Xiaoao yawned without image, and stretched again, I'll forget it, you know me, Uncle Yang. I don't have an appetite when I'm too sleepy. Su Xiaoao yawned again, wiping away the tears from the corners of his eyes, from last night to now, I'm almost sleepy. Uncle Yang, I will go upstairs for a night's sleep, and then call me for dinner. Good lady. Uncle Yang nodded. Su Xiaoao took the steps up the stairs and walked to her bedroom. She didn't know if it was an illusion. She always felt that today's Lu Mingfei had an inexplicable temperament compared to the past in school, as if he added a breath of confidence. In the guest room, Lu Mingfei dissipated the mana from the Taichung, and the extremely keen five senses retreated to the point where they were only 2 or 3 times stronger than ordinary people. Lu Mingfei once fought with Deadpool on the river next to the road. A head wearing a diving helmet protruded out of the water and slowly swam to the shore. A huge splash of water splashed, and a dark corpse 2 meters high was thrown onto the road from the water. Then a slender and graceful figure in a diving suit jumped out of the water. Ting Ting stood beside the dead waiter's corpse, still holding it in her hand. Holding half of his severed arm in pitch black. Zhu Demai threw the broken arm on the dead waiter's corpse, took off the diving helmet, and the long ponytail was twisted into a bun. The few big men next to him immediately stepped forward and stuffed the dead waiter's corpse and broken claws at her feet into the road and parked on the road. Closed pickup on the top. There are people watching on both sides of the road, so don't worry about being spotted. The blood in Deadpool's body is different from the stable blood of the mixed species. Although the blood of the common mixed species also contains dragon blood components, it is very stable. However, Deadpool has been alienated. The highly activated dragon blood in the body is extremely corrosive. Even if it is diluted by river water, it may affect the creatures in the river, so that Zhu Demai had to soak in the water for nearly 2 hours to investigate the risk. Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com. Fortunately, the investigation result is that there is no risk, and there will be no other troubles later. Zhu Demai held the helmet with one arm on the side, glanced at the sturdy men who were trying to fix the Deadpool body in the pickup, then scanned the surrounding environment and nodded in satisfaction. Almost all traces were covered up, even from the eyes of her ninja. She could only see something abnormal, but could not get other useful information. Although these subordinates of Potato Chip Girl are not mixed breed themselves, and have a little knowledge of mixed breeds and dragons, they are quite professional, and they are really good at removing traces and aftermath. Especially the 2 stalls of dead servant blood on the ground. When she went into the water, the dead servant blood had basically solidified on the asphalt road with small potholes on the surface, and it became very difficult to clean up. Now look at the location of the 2 blood pools. The asphalt road is still densely covered with small potholes, with no obvious signs of change, but the solidified blood of Deadpool has completely disappeared, and it is cleaner than the dog licked it. You did a good job, Zhu Demai praised the leader of several big guys. The scene was handled very well, especially the 2 stalls of blood. The blood coagulated on the asphalt road can be removed, and it hasn't affected the road itself at all. You guys are quite capable. After all, we are eating this bite of rice. The leading man smiled honestly, and said, but the 2 stalls of blood you mentioned were not actually caused by us, but a passing stray dog licked it clean. To be honest, we were worried about the 2 pools of blood before it came. Zhu Demai's eyes widened. Fuck me. Really licked by a dog? She wants to withdraw her previous evaluation. Potato Chip's subordinates are as unreliable as she is. In a pure white sea of knowledge space, Lu Mingfei sat cross-legged on the ground, his eyes closed, the heavenly book quietly suspended on top of his head, exuding a shining light, while sprinkling a jade-white brilliance, covering the road. Mingfei. After a long time, the radiance of the heavenly book's body dimmed a lot. Lu Mingfei opened his eyes, and the jade-white brilliance sprinkled by the heavenly book dissipated. Hey! I almost remember it, and the rest is practice. Lu Mingfei let out a sigh of relief, and the heavenly book slowly floated in front of him. Lu Mingfei waved his hand, and the rolled-up book slowly opened, but what was exposed was not the words written on it, but the dense cracks that covered the entire surface of the book. The crack is not only dense, but also looks very deep, almost running through the entire celestial book. Fortunately, the celestial book is not a mortal thing. Otherwise, even the tough bamboo slips would be broken into pieces of bamboo immediately after such a crack. These cracks only appear on the front of the book, and the rolled-up book shows only the reverse side. As a magic weapon, the preaching book does not need to be opened and let Lu Mingfei see it by himself. It has always instilled information directly, so Lu Mingfei has reached dozens of times. Only minutes ago did I know that the heavenly book was so badly damaged. The spiritual intelligence of the Tianzhu itself is very ignorant and rigid, and will not take the initiative to inform Lu Mingfei that it is damaged. Until a few dozen minutes ago, Lu Mingfei entered the consciousness space and asked the Tianzhu what he had last night. The doubts that have arisen have triggered a certain mechanism and learned of the damage to the heavenly book. Lu Mingfei's question is very simple. After checking the information in the internet cafe, he found that he was a little surprised to find that the Tiangang 36 magical powers and Earth Evil 7 Taituo magical powers recorded in the heavenly book were the same names in his world. Compared with the 26 laws and 7 Taituo techniques of Tiangang recorded in the Qing dynasty's Sanjiao Tong Yuan Lu novel in vernacular, although the details are slightly different, it is almost the same on the whole. Lu Mingfei didn't think much about it at the time, but subconsciously thought that the author of the book was also a great monk. He just casually wrote some monk's knowledge into the novel. As a result, when I asked the heavenly book for verification, Lu Mingfei only I found myself thinking about things too simple. The book of heaven is not in his world at all. Lu Mingfei was dumbfounded for a long time when he learned this information, and then he was dizzy by the bombs thrown by the heavenly book one after another. The Book of Heaven comes from a world that has a deep connection with his world. That world is prosperous and monks are like clouds. But it's all in the past tense, that world has exploded now. Yes, it exploded. Not only did it explode, but it also made almost no residue left. Only a handful of treasures that record the inheritance of Taoism like the heavenly book were sent out jointly by the mighty powers of that world before the world shattered, though the Taoism wanted with the world dying out, but at least try to leave behind the fire. If it can be sent to another world smoothly, then it is considered to be an inheritance of Taoism. As for the other inherited treasures that were sent away with the heavenly book, the heavenly book is already the world's top inherited treasure. After coming to his world from his own world, they are all damaged in such a way that they will break when touched. It is very likely that other heritage treasures will be wiped out. As for why the world exploded, the so-called extremely deep connection with his world, what is the specific connection method, why there is such a connection, etc., are all difficult to find because of the serious damage to the scriptures. We can only wait. Only when his cultivation base is high in the future will he be able to find out if he slowly repairs the heavenly scriptures. But Lu Mingfei still got some useful information. For example, because of the deep connection between the two worlds, a lot of information will reflect each other and be recorded in the way of inspiration by some people in the other world. Many real magical powers in that world can be found in this world. Become a kind of fantasy creation. And Lu Mingfei, some real historical process in this world, also turned into a huge historical novel in that world. Or the deeds of a certain great monk in that world are widely circulated, and it will become a novel in Lu Mingfei's world. There are too many to mention. Of course, inspiration is only inspiration after all, and the finished product will inevitably have some creator's artistic processing, such as 3 religions and same original record, which have very few discrepancies after all. But it doesn't make much sense now. After all, the world is gone, and there will be no way to talk about information mirroring in the future. There is also that the way of cultivation in that world seems to be unique to human beings. It is impossible for plants and beasts to step into the way of cultivation naturally, let alone innately enlightened like human beings. The vegetation and beasts that can become demons are either enlightened by humans with spells, or they are enlightened by other great demons. The children of great demons also need to be enlightened by magic, even if both parents are enlightened great demons. If a demon that can't transform into a human has an offspring with a human monk, then it will usually open up naturally. But enlightenment is not enlightenment. After being enlightened, the beasts of plants and trees will try to enlighten enlightenment like human beings. After enlightenment, they will be regarded as real monsters, otherwise they are just wiser things. Even if you step into the consecration with great pains, compared to humans, the talents of monsters are poor and pitiful. The most talented monsters are not as talented as second-rate humans, and their lifespan is often about 2 to 3% lower than that of humans of the same realm. Therefore, human beings in that world do not have the history of humiliation in some novels, and even human monks in that world have the same attitude toward monsters as they treat ordinary animals. They are all dismissive, unless the opponent is a master of advanced cultivation. The demon is qualified to let them take a high look. What is the so-called history of humiliation? That is also the history of humiliation by the demon. But with the world's destruction, it doesn't matter if you don't be humiliated. Whether it's a human or a monster, it's all gone with the world's destruction. In addition, there are bits and pieces of information. Liu Mingfei, who has been shocked many times in a short period of time, finds it difficult to calm down and think, and compared to these things that are too far away from him, he has just experienced the life and death crisis not long ago. Liu Mingfei has more important things to do. Hurry up and learn 2 spells from the Book of Heaven, and then learn a little bit of fist and footwork so as to protect yourself, so as to save yourself. The same as last night, a monk in the breath-eating realm actually used mana to play hand-to-hand combat with monsters. He is not a cultivator of the rotating light realm who has already started to practice the physical body. With his small body, it is better to learn some spells than to fight melee with sleeves. Kung Fu also has to learn something. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com saves it. If it gets close, it will only hit a punch. Last night, the monster beast's combination of tricks directly defeated him. In order to resist those attacks, his mana was directly consumed by nearly half. Fortunately, he exploded and killed him in the end, otherwise the body may be cold. He has always liked to kill opponents in fighting games, but in reality, he was almost retributed to death. So he just concentrated on learning 2 spells and a set of relatively simple boxing techniques from the Tianshu. These 3 kinds of skills will be enough for him to practice for a period of time. After he has learned something, he will not be as passive as last night if he encounters any accident. It's just that he is a little curious. How did the monster that attacked him become a monster? Was it enlightened by the monks in his world? Or does it mean that the demon in his world can embark on the path of cultivation without monks' enlightenment? And most importantly, what was the reason that monster attacked him? Liu Mingfei was puzzled, and left the sea of knowledge with doubts. In the pure white space, the space fluctuates like water, and a short figure emerges from the undulating ripples. It is a little boy with black hair and golden eyes, wearing a decent little suit and delicate tie. As soon as Liu Ming's appeared, he immediately raised his hands to the quietly floating heavenly book. I'm here to talk to you, and you can feel the situation tonight. If it weren't for me, my brother would be in danger. So I think we can actually. The white light masterpiece of the heavenly book, Liu Ming showed an expression looking through the red dust. His calm eyes seemed to say, "Come on, I'm ready." After a short burst of air, the heavenly book flew back to its original position, leaving only the heavenly book floating quietly in the pure white sea of consciousness.